At the behest of Morgan Mc...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk. Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Friday afternoon. The FBI say they have their man. Tyler Robinson is the person they think killed Charlie Kirk. He apparently confessed to his father. We'll have the latest from the United States in just a moment and speak to a former ambassador as well about where this leaves things. We'll talk about Peter Mandelson as well. This is a very, very big story. Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister, under huge pressure for a second day. Also the Labour Party looking to elect a deputy leader. Should that be Bridget Phillipson or the recently sacked Cabinet Minister Lucy Powell? Lots to discuss. We're also talking about the BBC, which has censured staff for calling Hamas terrorists. Yes, really. We'll talk about that between now and 7 o'clock. I want your views on all of this. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, let's get straight into that big story in regard to what has happened in America. Tyler Robinson, the 22-year-old suspect, he's been named as the Charlie Kirk murder suspect, and bullet casings have been found with inscriptions, with one unfired casing with "Hey Fascist" catch on it, and we've been hearing as well from the Utah Governor, Spencer Cox. That's what happened in the state of Utah, and he has thanked Robinson's family for doing the right thing. FBI Director Kash Patel praising the investigation, saying historic progress was made in just 33 hours. Well, in the last hour, Spencer Cox, the Governor of Utah, as I said, he gave an update on the hunt for Charlie Kirk's assassin.
We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident.
Well, Spencer Cox also outlined the possible motives for the attack.
Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital OWO, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist!" exclamation point, "Catch!" exclamation point. Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Ciao Ciao," and a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO."
LMAO, obviously laughing my ass off, which is the thing that many people use in the shorthand, of course, a lot of that shorthand, of course, being explained there by Spencer Cox. Earlier in the day, the President, Donald Trump, spoke to Fox News about his friend, Charlie Kirk.
Any updates on the suspect?
Yeah. Can I always say, I think, just to protect us all, and so Fox doesn't get sued, and we all don't get sued, and everything else, but I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job.
Well, Scarlett Howes is the US editor of The Sun and joins us now. Scarlett, dramatic developments here. Just bring us through them.
Yes, very dramatic. So this morning we found out that they had actually caught the shooter last night at around 10 p.m. local time. A family friend had brought him in along with his father. We believe that his father contacted a family friend after the man told him that what he had done. He has been named as Tyler Robinson, and he's from Utah, Washington, which is about 3.5 hours from the Utah Valley University. Police told us today, the FBI in a conference, that he had traveled to the university. They have new footage of him arriving wearing a maroon top and bottoms. He then changed into black clothing and went up onto the roof, and then afterwards they have footage of him leaving the roof and going and heading into a neighborhood, a local neighborhood, and dumping the rifle there. We found out actually he had a car waiting for him, a car that he had driven to the university himself, because I think there was a lot of questions at the time as to how was he at the university, how he arrived there. So they really cleared up quite a lot of the questions that we had. We obviously know that he was politicized from a roommate that had gone to the police and given them messages that he had exchanged with them. We don't know what's in these messages yet, but we do know that the messages say confirm that he wanted to attack fascists.
Yeah. I wonder, you're in Utah at the moment, Scarlett, is that correct? Yeah. What? Just tell us about the atmosphere there. Tell us how people are reacting to this news today and what they've been telling you.
I think everyone's quite shocked. It's been, I mean, the atmosphere here has been, people are very upset about what's happened. Utah's quite a safe state. People, are very nice people here. I think they just are quite shocked by what's happened. I spoke to a few students yesterday who had actually witnessed the attack and who actually live in the neighborhood where the shooter dumped the rifle. So, it's incredibly shocking for them to think that this happened right on their doorstep. And I think today there's a sense of relief that he's been caught, because there was a little bit of fear that he was still on the loose in the neighborhood. People were a little bit scared still. They didn't know what was going to happen, and I think now they feel like they've got a little bit closure as well, in terms of for Charlie Kirk's family as well, that now he's been caught. So there's definitely a sense of relief there, but also sadness about what's happened. And I think sadness for the family too, because remember, this is somebody's son as well. So, of course, I think people also have a little bit of, empathy towards them as well, because the situation at the moment, we don't know what's happened.
Just finally, Scarlett, I know you'll be writing about this for The Sun tomorrow. I just wonder, is there a sense that do we know very much whether he was acting alone, whether he was part of an organisation, whether this was just his own thoughts and hatred towards Charlie Kirk, or whether there was anything larger afoot here?
Well, we don't know that at the moment. Police said that police have believed that police haven't actually said he was acting alone. Police have said that they aren't charging anybody else in connection to the case. So the investigation is still ongoing, so we don't know. However, I did speak to a person yesterday, who I won't name. They said that the FBI have been looking at door cam footage that allegedly shows the shooter speaking to somebody on the phone as he walks away from the neighborhood, which can imply that there may be somebody else involved, but we don't know that yet. But that's what I've exclusively found out.
Okay, well, Scarlett, thank you for that. The Scarlett House there, who is the US editor of The Sun, will read, of course, all of her coverage of this tomorrow in the paper. Let's speak to Lou Lukens now. He's a former US diplomat, former Deputy Chief of Mission to the US Embassy in London. Lou, thanks for joining us. I appreciate that. This is just a tremendously bad day for America, of course, but the law enforcement officers did their job and did it quickly.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's a difficult day for America. I think any time that someone is assassinated for expressing political views is a dark day. I think, the case has been solved, apparently. They've captured a suspect who appears to have been the one who carried out the shooting. So in that sense, that's good. And that small chapter is closed. But there's a lot of, this is an issue which is going to continue to roil American politics, I think, over the course of the next couple of weeks and months, because the event has become so politicized, with many on the right immediately blaming the left for this assassination, and the political mood and the public discourse around this has become very poisonous and very dangerous very quickly.
There is such poison there, Lou, as you correctly say. You talk about the right blaming the left. There are some on the left as well, essentially suggesting, including this country, that Charlie Kirk deserved it. I mean, it's just so unseemly.
Well, it's terrible, and I think it reflects the extreme polarization that we're seeing in American politics these days, and the fact that both the left and the right tend to play to the base, the more extreme wings of their base. And so you get this real sort of, anger and contrast between the far left and the far right. And it's increasingly difficult in American politics, I think, to find common ground and to find consensus around things like people should be able to express political opinions and disagree with one another without killing each other.
Absolutely. I wonder if I could ask you about another matter. It's a huge political story here in the UK. I expect in America as well. It's been noticed too in regard to Peter Mandelson, Lord Mandelson, who was our ambassador until yesterday. I just wonder what your reflections are on the fact that this has happened, especially on the eve of a state visit as well, which I'm sure many of your former colleagues at the US Embassy here in London have been working very, very hard on as well.
Yeah, so the timing is interesting, and I think, look, the Epstein scandal is something that Donald Trump has very much been hoping will go away. He has done a lot of things to try to distract attention from that and shift public focus. And I think I don't know what was in the emails that are soon to be unveiled, I think, but clearly Lord Mandelson had a closer relationship with Jeffrey Epstein than had previously been disclosed or known about. And I think obviously it was sort of untenable for him to continue if the focus was all going to be on him and Epstein, and would have detracted from the state visit. And given that and the fact that Donald Trump wants to shift attention away from the Epstein scandal, I think Keir Starmer did probably the only thing he could, which was to recall Lord Mandelson immediately. Was
Keir Starmer right to make a political appointment to that role, given how Donald Trump operates, or should it have been a career diplomat, do you think? I'm just thinking about the next person they think about appointing to that role.
Well, look, I mean, I think the UK has had some excellent political and career ambassadors in Washington over the years. The US, of course, almost always has only political ambassadors in London. So I think, it's not really a question of political versus career ambassadors in Washington. I think it's more someone who has the trust of the prime minister, and also the trust and the ability to gain the trust of the president. And I think given the circumstances in this case, it would be difficult for Lord Mandelson to argue that he had the trust of either of the two leaders, at this point.
Lou, thank you. That's Lou Lukens there. He's a former US diplomat, former Deputy Chief of Mission of the United States Embassy in London. Appreciate his contribution today. What do you think about what he has said, about what Scarlett has said, the information now in the public domain in regard to Charlie Kirk's murder as well? 0344 499 1000. Thank you to Paul, who's contacted us on Mandelson. It says, I was vetted to the highest degree for 30 years. The vetting was rigorous and renewed every 10 years, and you had a sort of MOT every 2 years to make sure all was as it should be. The fact that Starmer has ignored what sounds like a failed vetting process for Mandelson brings into question the integrity of the vetting process at governmental level. Starmer chose to ignore the vetting process, which is there to ensure that the people filling in these roles are trustworthy and free from any possibility of compromise or bribery. Starmer must go, says Paul. Lots to discuss, including with one of Keir Starmer's party colleagues. Labour MP Kim Johnson will join us next.
Peter Mandelson was His Majesty's ambassador, His Majesty's envoy. Trump was thinking of it more as the royals rather than a kind of political appointment and kind of Westminster politics. So I think he's pretty unhappy at how domestic political opinion and Labour Party internal pressures have forced the removal of someone he quite liked. So I think that that's put a down on it. And of course, every time we've had one of these visits, Alex, we think the whole question is, will the kind of Trump-Starmer relationship blow up? We've had a couple now. I think it's taken the sting out of it. But right now, it seems that there could potentially be some flare-up.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Kim Johnson is the Labour MP for Liverpool Riverside. Kim, thanks for your time this afternoon. How are you?
Peter, I'm very well, thank you so much.
How good a job do you think Keir Starmer is doing at the moment?
Well, his judgment's been brought into question, hasn't it, Peter? You know, we've had over the last couple of weeks with Angie and his statement on supporting Mandelson at the dispatch box on Wednesday didn't go down too well. And if you're asking me, Mandelson should never have been appointed as the US ambassador. You know, he comes with a lot of baggage. He's already been sacked for two indiscretions, put it that way. And this was third time lucky. But, you know, from my point of view, it's not enough for him to be sacked as the ambassador. He needs to lose the whip. You know, a couple of my colleagues lost the whip for simply supporting disabled people and children in poverty. So it's not good enough for him to retain those positions, Peter.
The person who, of course, appointed Peter Mandelson, there are lots of questions about whether the vetting process was followed correctly, whether the information that is in the public domain now was known or not known. We knew a few months ago, for example, that Peter Mandelson had stayed in the flat of Jeffrey Epstein when Jeffrey Epstein had been in prison for paedophilia. All of this just doesn't amount to good judgment from the Prime Minister. Do you think, when you look back over the last 14 months, that Keir Starmer has displayed good judgment?
Well, I would have to say that as the MP for Liverpool Riverside, you know, a constituency that has high levels of deprivation and poverty, some of the policies that have been delivered during that time, particularly with the changes to winter fuel allowance and the debate and the decisions that were taken around welfare benefits haven't gone down well in my constituency. You know, the government's position on Gaza hasn't gone down too well. And I think this situation with Mandelson now is a bit like straws that broke camel's back, you know, because it's just one thing. We're just lurching from one crisis to another. And as I've just mentioned, Mandelson should never have been appointed, as you've just stated. It was known about his relationship, about him staying in the flats. The recent revelations that we've heard this week are unacceptable. And when you've got party loyalists coming out and defending the indefensible, I think is unacceptable. And it does bring into judgment, you know, our Prime Minister's judgment in terms of some of these issues. And so we have been impacted quite negatively because of some of this, you know, trust and confidence in the party has, I think, dwindled to an all-time low. And so we need to have a reset, a proper reset and a phase two to pull back from some of these issues and the crises and do what the party said it was going to do last July, which was, you know, to create change and provide hope. We haven't had an awful lot of that, and we need more of that going forward.
I mean, that's a pretty damning indictment of Keir Starmer's leadership. Do you think he's the right person to lead the Labour Party?
But, Peter, he was democratically elected as a leader.
Those are two different things, Kim.
I know, to do different things. You know, I would say that there has been, you know, mistakes, and the leader is responsible, the Prime Minister is responsible, the buck stops here, and there will be, you know, challenges, I think, down the line in terms of his position.
Do you think someone near enough your neck of the woods, certainly closer to Liverpool than to London, Andy Burnham, could be someone who would provide that challenge, and would you support him if he did?
Oh, well, that's a big ask, isn't it, Peter? You know, Andy is currently the Metro Mayor of Greater Manchester. You know, there isn't a position. He's not an MP, and the only way he would be able to be in a position to be elected was to be an MP, and he's not there yet. It's not happening yet.
There are definitely a lot of what-ifs, Kim. There's no doubt about that. But if a credible candidate came forward and said, Keir Starmer, the time has come for a leadership contest, would you back that person if you agreed with them?
Well, it would depend on the situation and that person, Peter. my politics are quite different from that of Keir Starmer, and I've seen some significant changes to the Labour Party. It doesn't appear to be the same Labour Party that I've been a member of and a supporter of all of my adult life, and we do need to reset, and we do need to have policies that impact positively on our most deprived communities. The government talks about having to make hard decisions, but sadly, those hard decisions fall often on our most vulnerable and on our deprived communities. They don't fall on millionaires or the billionaires that have benefited, over the last couple of years. So we need policies that, have a significant positive impact on our communities, and that hasn't been happening as of yet. Child poverty is a massive issue in my constituency, and if we see the government talking about removing the 2-child cap in the budget later on in autumn, I think that will be a positive move forward.
It's interesting. I mean, you clearly feel let down by Keir Starmer. Do you feel he has let the country down?
I feel let down by the policies that have impacted very negatively on our constituencies, and it had a massive impact in terms of trust and confidence. People are not voting for Starmer. His popularity has hit the floor. So something's not going right, and that needs to change.
When there is now a deputy leadership contest in the Labour Party, I think Bel Ribeiro Addy was your preferred candidate. I think I remember reading that. Which of Lucy Powell or Bridget Phillipson do you think would be the best person, and who do you think, which of the two of them do you think would actually provide this reset or help provide the reset that you want, Kim?
Well, I did nominate Bel. I think Bel would have been great to be on the nomination paper. I think a left voice would have been really good, not the voice of the party machinery. And so I'm sad that didn't happen. But if I'm honest with you, I would more likely go for Lucy Powell in terms of the candidate to be the deputy leader of the party. I think she's no longer a minister. I think Bridget's probably got the machinery of the party behind her, and I think Lucy does have a lot of popularity. And I just want somebody that is open, honest, and will be a real challenge to the government, going forward, because that's what we need at this moment in time.
It's really interesting. You clearly feel quite disillusioned by this. How much are your opinions shared by your party colleagues here? You're clearly not just one person who is annoyed by this, and are some perhaps looking over the fence at Jeremy Corbyn's party?
Really couldn't say that, but you're asking me. I'm a Labour politician. I've been a Labour Party member for a long time, and that's where my allegiances lie, and I will continue to be a member of the Labour Party. We've heard this week about, another group, the mainstream group, with people getting involved in that. We do need.
What do you think of the mainstream group? This is Andy Burnham's group. What do you make of that group? Is that what's needed? Can that help with the way things are? You're talking about lurching from one crisis to another.
But the party's come out and talked about factions. I think developing more groups just creates more factions, and what we need now is unity. We're not going to win power in the next election.
How can there be unity when people like you? I'm not criticising you for this in the slightest, Kim. You're being very honest today, and I appreciate that. But how can there be unity when people like you feel so annoyed and so let down by Keir Starmer? Can he get that unity back, or has the time come for someone else to take the lead?
But, we are a broad church, and, that should be reflected across the PLP in positions, particularly on the front bench. And sadly, we're not seeing that. We did see that under Tony Blair, and I think lessons need to be learned. We need, a range of voices. And, if we're not united and if we're not unified, I think that will be our downfall going forward.
I know you've got a meeting at 4:30, so I just want to ask you one very, very quick question before you go, Kim. This Charlie Kirk assassination, this horrible thing that's happened in America, obviously his opinions would not be your opinions, but nonetheless, what is your view of what has happened there and the fact that they appear to have apprehended the killer?
But I just think, what happened to Charlie Kirk, is a travesty. We've seen very similar, in terms of this country, Joe Cox and David Amess, people should have the right to free speech. My colleague, sadly, this week, Sharon Hodgson, has had her office burned down. We as politicians and public figures are under threat all of the time. We shouldn't be under threat. We should live in a society where we are able to voice our opinions and our views without the threat of being injured in any way. And so my thoughts are very much with Charlie Kirk and his family and loved ones at this moment in time.
Kim, thank you. I'll let you get to your meeting. That is Kim Johnson there, who is the Liverpool Riverside MP. She's a member of the Labour Party. Really quite striking, actually, some of the things she said there, lurching from one crisis to another, talking about failures of leadership, talking about a lack of unity within the Labour Party. I think we got a very straightforward, a very honest and clearly a very critical of Keir Starmer interview there from Kim Johnson. You don't often hear that from Labour MP. She's of course on the left of the party. She was talking about supporting Bel Ribeiro Addy for deputy leader. She of course isn't a candidate, but this is someone more on the left of the Labour Party who's probably, clearly is not in the same wheelhouse as Keir Starmer's politics. But nonetheless, we're 14 months in to a government where people are coming on national television, national radio, talking about the Prime Minister and the very, very difficult position he's been in. Really interesting that a Labour MP has chosen to do that today. Let's speak to Jill in Cornwall. Jill, I don't know how much of that interview you heard, but I just wonder what your thoughts on Keir Starmer are. Thanks for giving me a ring on 0344 499 1000.
Well, I'm surprised she's a Labour councillor or Labour MP, simply because it doesn't seem to fit in. Her views don't seem to fit in with the way Keir Starmer is coming across.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but we need a vote of no confidence, because what's happening to this country is we're being governed and led by someone who doesn't even know the type of people that he has as MPs in his own party.
He has very little connection to them, certainly, and I would wonder, I should have asked her, but I would wonder how many conversations Kim Johnson has been having with Keir Starmer. A lot of people say that he doesn't just converse with his troops, he doesn't listen to them, and many people as well, I don't know how you feel about this, Jill, just feeling he's just not listening to the country either.
No, he's not listening to anyone. And I think that he knows more about the things that are going wrong with the politicians in this country than he's actually making out. We had a housing minister that didn't know the facts of housing. We've got a minister that deals with America that has now things are coming out about him that I am horrified by. Mm-hmm. And I'm sorry, but we work and live in this country. We pay our taxes. We support the people that supposedly govern us, and we hope that the way they govern us and what they decide is for the best of this country. But at the moment, it's getting steadily worse, and the people running the country should not be doing it. Keir Starmer is not. He's not a political leader because we're getting lied to, we're being cheated on, we're being told that we are not allowed to have a view or an opinion that is different than what they tell us we have to believe in. And I'm sorry, I don't. It's difficult to know how to say it without it sounding as if I'm being biased and what have you. But at the end of the day,
listen, Jill, you're very clearly and very honestly talking about how you feel about it, and the fact that you just feel let down by the government. That's a perfectly legitimate thing to say, because so many of our viewers and listeners feel the same way, Jill.
Yeah, well, this supporting of Hamas and Gaza, I can't tolerate. I feel awful about that, because it looks as if we're supporting an organisation that is regarded as illegal. I just feel that we're on a path of destruction if we're not careful. And people in this country are feeling unsettled, unhappy, almost threatened, really, because the way we're going is not the way the majority of people want to go. And we're a good country. We've got good people in this country.
Totally agree.
Good leaders. And we're stuck now with a leader that, well, he doesn't know what's happening in his own party, let alone what's happening in the country.
Jill, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate your call today. That's Jill in Cornwall there. Kevin, Southampton, I think, probably feels the same. He didn't know about the Southport killer. He didn't know about Lucy Connolly, as her case didn't come across his desk. He's got to be finished as Prime Minister, surely, says Kev. Another person says we now need to declare anti for a terrorist organisation here in the UK and the USA. Also, face masks, any protest should be banned. Tomorrow's protest in London should be kept separate, away from each other, and no face masks allowed, no excuses, says this person. Elizabeth says, I hope someone directly challenges John McDonnell to take back his words of fascist now that it's been revealed that word was inscribed on one of the bullets marked for assassination of Charlie Kirk, or to a government minister over their members' remarks. Thank you to Colin as well. He says, yesterday it was announced MI6 had told the Prime Minister Mandelson was a risk, yet still placed him there. If this is the case, why aren't you pushing more on this point and calling for a vote of no confidence in Starmer? Well, Colin, we certainly have covered that, and we talked to both the MP about that for Labour and indeed the former ambassador. We're going to continue to cover that throughout the show. It's an absolute scandal, and that has been suggested. It's been denied by the government. If it in fact did happen, it's very, very serious indeed. On Andy Burnham, no, says June. He knew about the rape gangs in his area. He did nothing about them. Don't forget Maggie Oliver was a detective constable for Greater Manchester. I'm sure Andy Burnham would say he did plenty about it, but there are many, many questions still there. Becca says, well done, you found a nearly honest Labour MP. Makes a change, she'll jump ship soon, says Becca. Lots more to discuss about this. James Heal is coming up, the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. We'll get his views on all of this. I want yours too. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you very much. Lots of reaction to what Kim Johnson said there, the Labour MP for Liverpool Riverside. Angela's been in touch, says your interview with Kim Johnson was refreshing. It's good to know that real Labour people still exist, so thank you for that. Appreciate that. Many, many people giving their thoughts on this, including Paul and Fife. Why do we need a Deputy Leader and a Deputy Prime Minister for the Labour Party? Surely the Deputy Leader should be Deputy Prime Minister. Am I missing something? Paul, the answer is not really, but let's get into this a little bit more in just a second with James Heal, who is Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. James, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Peter.
I don't know how much you heard of what Kim Johnson said there, but she talked about Labour lurching from one crisis to another. She talked about Keir Starmer. I said, is he the right person to lead the Labour Party? She gave a very politician's answer when she said he's been democratically elected in order to do so. I know she's on the left of the party, but I haven't heard such an excoriating criticism of a Prime Minister from a member of that Prime Minister's party since at least a year since Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister. So it really is quite striking, I think, that Kim Johnson felt she could do that today. And she was very honest and straightforward, and we're very grateful to her for coming on. But James, I know behind the scenes you talk to Labour MPs every day of the week. This is not a unique opinion.
Absolutely not. And what's so striking, Peter, is that this afternoon 2 other left-wing MPs on rival stations, Paula Barker and Clive Lewis, have effectively made the same criticism. Now, all 3 are on the left of the party, members of the soft left or socialist campaign group, and you wonder if there's a degree of coordination going on here with all this, Peter. But this week I've been speaking to Labour MPs, and increasingly they are discontent with the direction of this government, and they are questioning, in less and less coded terms, the Prime Minister's judgment in terms of making these appointments and the seeming inability to communicate to the country and to his colleagues what exactly he wants to do with the office that so many of them worked so hard to get in the first place.
How dangerous is this for Keir Starmer? Should he worry?
I think that it is pretty dangerous for him. I think that the party wants to give him another shot. I think that this reshuffle was being described last week by people in Parliament I spoke to as Morgan McSweeney, the Chief of Staff, as his last gamble. And I think that they are willing to see how it all goes by the spring. Now, in the spring, Peter, of course, we're going to have Labour probably lose an election in Wales for the first time in 100 years to Reform UK and Plaid Cymru. They're potentially going to come even third in Scotland, and they'll lose many seats across the whole of the country. So when that happens, that could be a crunch point, because there's nothing quite like watching MPs, your colleague, lose their seats in a municipal sports hall at 3 a.m. to harden the passions in the heart and convince people that action needs to be taken. So I think that the Labour Party, famously not very regicidal, next spring, that could be a moment of real danger for Keir Starmer.
There's been a lot of speculation about Morgan McSweeney's own position. He's the very powerful Chief of Staff behind Keir Starmer. Of course, he succeeded Sue Gray, but he's been really, since Keir Starmer has been leader. In fact, as Patrick Maguire and Gabriel Pogren's book suggests, they sort of chose Keir Starmer to be leader of the Labour Party, and he was the vessel through which Morgan McSweeney's ideas about the Labour Party were played out. I just wonder whether he is at any risk today, or perhaps that's overplayed.
I think he is in real risk, yes. And I think that it's easier to criticise the Chief of Staff as a proxy for Keir Starmer than it is to go after the leader himself. I think that the Mandelson episode has potentially exposed him, and you're certainly seeing all this talk of people in government briefing against him and suggesting that security warnings were ignored. I think that the reshuffle last week, Labour is a very factional party. The kind of soft left, the left, all think that they've been shafted, frankly, and that Morgan McSweeney is the author of their downfall. And as a result, they're out for blood. So I do think that if we don't see an improvement by next spring, Keir Starmer, who's famously ruthless, may have to get rid of Morgan McSweeney or some people around him. There's never been a Keir Starmer without Morgan McSweeney in terms of the past 5 years. As you say, Gabriel and Patrick have always stressed that without him, as Starmer himself said, there is no such thing as Starmerism. So could he actually get rid of him? That remains to be seen. But right now we are in charted waters for this leader, who is now on 20% in the polls.
James, I know you're an excitable chap. I'm glad you're sitting down when we talk about this, but the deputy leadership contest for the Labour Party, Bridget versus Lucy, Lucy Powell and Bridget Phillipson. Perhaps you could explain to Paul and Fife why we need a deputy leader and a deputy prime minister of the Labour Party. Those are separate positions, of course.
Well, one of those positions, I would suggest, is a matter of political inconvenience for Keir Starmer, and the other is very much one of political convenience. That is the deputy leadership, a post which some people around Keir Starmer would like to abolish. It's always been a sort of irritant on the side of the leaders. Became vacant when Angela Rayner was forced to resign from that post 2 weeks ago. And so therefore there has to be a contest to fill that. And in terms of the deputy premiership, really that is a bauble created to kind of soothe and alleviate the feelings of David Lammy, who was forced out of the Foreign Office to get given the more junior post of Lord Chancellor. And it's a bit like Don Raab 2 years ago, really, who was given this post of Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister in order to make up for losing the great office of state at the Foreign Office. So one of those is a party matter, the other is about government.
After the sea was closed. It's really interesting, actually, in regard to Lucy Powell and Bridget Phillipson, because if Bridget Phillipson becomes Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, well, she's Education Secretary, that's the way things are, and she'll presumably not be Deputy Prime Minister. But if Lucy Powell becomes Deputy Leader of the Labour Party, well, there'll be pressure, won't there, on Keir Starmer to bring her back into the Cabinet after only a few days ago sacking her. She was the one, of course, who said that to talk about the rape gangs inquiry was dog whistle politics.
Yes, absolutely. If you exclude Angela Rayner, who had to go, the only person sacked in that cabinet reshuffle was Bridget Phillipson, who was Lucy Powell. And as a result of that, just 10 days or so following that, she may now become the front runner to replace Rayner as his deputy. So what does that say for his judgment? Look, I think that Lucy Powell's potential election shows there's a lot of discontent out there. She is obviously an ally of the very powerful Greater Manchester Mayor, Andy Burnham. And I think that if it was her who's elected, it would be a rebuke to the Starmer leadership, who really didn't want to contest. People were going around on Monday talking in Parliament how they didn't want to contest. It was going to be Bridget Phillipson all the way. If Phillipson gets it, as you say, Peter, I think it's far less of a story. Although I would point out maybe that Phillipson is someone who fancies their own chances for the top job. If she got that deputy leadership, given there's a kind of a sort of vacuum in the party right now with some people demoted and actually, Lammy and Cooper seem unlikely to run for leader, she would be in prime contention potentially to take Keir Starmer's job one day.
Ian Murray, of course, the Scotland Secretary, was sacked as well, though he's re-emerged as a junior minister. But all I can say about him is that he slagged off Larry the Cat. He said he was a little four-letter word. And when you slag off Larry the Cat, I'm afraid life is not going to be quite good for you. Larry is still, by the way, in Downing Street, it should be said. On a slightly more serious note, I wonder what Starmer does now. We're in phase 2. It's not exactly going particularly well. We've had 10 days where he's lost both the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, and the US Ambassador. More revelations today on Mandelson. Just bring us up to date.
Yes, so the revelations today are about the security services potentially giving warnings when Lord Mandelson was being vetted, suggesting that he was not up to scratch in terms of their procedures. And yet, despite that, this appointment was approved. Now, Mandelson camp is briefing that actually, he passed all the vetting. Keir Starmer knew a lot of this stuff that supposedly he didn't know before Mandelson was sacked yesterday. And it is really a sense, I think, potentially of a falling out. And there's lots of people in government right now who are fearing that Peter Mandelson's going to come back from America, vengeful, looking for, a scalp. And much like we saw Dominic Cummings 5 years ago, he could potentially be a very dangerous ally for some people in number 10 right now. Yeah,
that is a really interesting point, actually, about Peter Mandelson, because the thing is, these people never go away. He's no intention, I'm sure, of relinquishing his role as a Lord as well. So there's a lot in this. I wonder, from Starmer's perspective as well, obviously you've got the state visit coming up. Someone said to me yesterday, "Oh yes, have you been preparing for the state visit?" And I said yes, for thinking immediately about my mother coming on Sunday. But actually, Donald Trump is coming for a few days.
Who's more of a diva, Peter? That's what I want to know.
I wouldn't want to answer that one. I'm afraid I'll plead the fifth on that one. I would say they're certainly both unpredictable. That's what I would say. And yes. Anyway, we'll move on swiftly from that. But James, I just wonder, with the state visit coming up, I mean, so much of that, of course, will be pomp and ceremony, but there are many aspects as well that are trade is a big issue, of course, and that was part of the reason that Peter Mandelson, a former EU Trade Commissioner, was actually chosen to be ambassador. So there are jobs and livelihoods at stake here as well, aren't there?
Yes, of course, and Ukraine being the other one. And so my understanding is that people in the Ministry of Defence have been trying to work out what kind of deals can be done with America in terms of the United States getting contracts to buy services and different American firms as well. All those conversations will be going on behind the scenes. And this is the last thing. The state visit has become a bit of a state. Most serious things, of course, being the conflicts in Ukraine and Gaza. What does it mean for all of that? My understanding is, from talking to people in Whitehall, is that some in the White House are very unhappy with how this has overshadowed it. Of course, Trump sees himself as the equal of the king. Peter Mandelson was the king's representative in Washington, the envoy of the monarch, someone who Trump does respect. And so to have this disrespect shown to him, for Mandelson to be axed for domestic political reasons, petty Labour concerns, as far as Trump is concerned, is regarded in some quarters as a bit of an insult, and definitely not what you needed ahead of a really important visit. The most key thing I'll be looking for, Peter, is that big Chequers press conference. I'm sure you'll be there next week. And we've had a couple of press conferences beforehand, and number 10, we're very nervous about all of them because Trump, you never know what he's going to say. This one could be the one that blows up because he's been disrespected, and right now tensions, after being initially pretty good on this government, are at a bit of a low point.
Very, very interesting. Maybe they'll send David Lammy in to sort it all out as Deputy Prime Minister, the person who, of course, called Donald Trump a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath. Someone who's definitely not a neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath is James Heal. He is the Deputy Political Editor of The Spectator. Thank you for that, James. Appreciate that. And lots to discuss in that. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll take some of your calls after the break. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Mike in Hemel Hempstead, who says Kim Johnson was brilliant. Thank you to Jane, who said, I've seen Kim Johnson speak in the House. I don't agree with much of her politics. In your interview, she was very honest, and that is what the public like to hear from our politicians. I have another message as well from Jason in the Lake District, who's been in touch to say, listening to Kim Johnson, I get the impression that we are going to see, that this is just the start. We're going to see and hear many more Labour MPs publicly speaking out against Starmer. He's even weaker now than he was yesterday. It's just getting worse day by day. Jane says, unfortunately for the public, what comes after Starmer is going to be worse unless there is a general election. And Leslie says, Kim Johnson never mentioned the cost of illegal immigrants, where that cost could be used to help her constituents, not more tax and benefits. We certainly would have got into that, Leslie, had there been a bit more time. Leslie also says the Labour conference will be interesting, and the Labour MPs in Liverpool can't blame Starmer for Angie going. Leslie, you're right, the Labour Party conference is in Liverpool again this year. We'll have full coverage, of course, here on Talk. Jenny in Bicester says Lucy Powell will get the deputy leadership as McSweeney and Starmer planned. I actually think that they didn't want her to do that. I think they want Bridget Phillipson to do that. So, Jenny, I respectfully suggest that you're wrong on that. Max in Warwickshire says, loving Kim Johnson, how refreshing. A frank, honest and adult conversation from two different sides of a fence. More please, says Max in Warwickshire. And that is certainly what Charlie Kirk wanted to do. He is someone who spoke out on many occasions about the need for civilised debate. I think Kim Johnson and I had that today. Certainly, I'm going to be speaking to another MP in a few minutes' time about the state of the Conservative Party. We have, of course, many updates on Charlie Kirk today in regard to where we are with that. They say the Governor of Utah has said that he believes the suspect is now in custody. Ben is in London and has given me a ring about this. Ben, this is just a horrendous tragedy. I know you have some thoughts on the historical context of this as well.
Yeah, hi. It's the first time I've called into you today.
Well, you're very welcome to on the air, Ben. Tell us your thoughts.
Yeah, I feel that obviously, I feel very, very sorry for the death of Charlie. But then when we look back at Melissa Hortman in the 14th of June, and we go back to Brian Thompson and we go back to the CEO, and then we look back at John Lennon, we look back at Malcolm X, we look back at Kennedy, we look back at Lincoln, we look back at Martin Luther King, and we look back at all these deaths in America that were for freedom of speech that they were trying to give.
Yeah, certainly, and I mean there is. I don't want to use, there are certainly a number of, you've cited them there, I think of people like Bobby Kennedy as well, JFK, people who were strong political leaders or people who had things to say, who were then taken out by political violence. And what a horrible irony that Charlie Kirk was someone who said, actually, to avoid violence, what you do is talk.
Exactly. And these people were only trying to air their points of view. They were trying to make a debate. They were trying to put across that they thought that this was the way forward. There was nothing against. There was nothing negative against what they were trying to do. Yeah. And I find it so heartbreaking that people have to die to actually air a point of view, and that's let's hope that dying and that killing ends, because maybe this can be the end of it, Ben. I hope it is anyway, but I fear I'm wrong on that. Ben, thank you so much. That's Ben in London there. I want to talk to Daniel in Shropshire also, who's given me a ring about Charlie Kirk. Daniel, what do you think of this?
Oh, it's obviously, although I was a massive fan of Charlie's for years, but I don't remember, about 3, maybe 4 weeks ago, I called you up and had a rant that said that when I said we needed a legal definition of far-left extremism.
I do, I remember the call.
The left have...
It wasn't a rant, by the way, Daniel. It was a very well-argued case, and I have a feeling you're about to make another one.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So this came from the years of constant branding of labeling people on the right fascists, Nazis, and far right when they are not. And I was about to release my first published book yesterday, but I cancelled it because of what happened with Charlie Kirk. But I just want to read you a quick passage from my book which I wrote 2 weeks ago.
Okay, go for it.
For this. This is where the phrase stochastic terrorism becomes grimly relevant. It's the idea that you don't need to hand someone a brick or a knife. You simply create an environment in which some excitable, unstable individual believes violence is not only justified but righteous. It's what happens when public vilification becomes a sport. Accuse someone loudly enough, often enough, of being the enemy of all that is good, and sooner or later someone will take it upon themselves to deal with them. It's quite literally the definition of creating a permissive environment.
Very, very interesting. And how is that? Who is creating that environment? Do you think? Maybe not name. Is that the left? Is that the right? Is that is? I'm not looking for any excuses. There is no excuse for Charlie Kirk, but there is an atmosphere, as you're saying.
Well, I'll tell you with this thing though. If you actually look at the political stigma, it comes mainly from the left with their constant use of fascist, Nazi, far right. But I do go on to explain this. I'll make it quick. This isn't just a few overheated activists getting carried away. The systemic use of these tactics works to delegitimize an entire political position. It pushes lawful viewpoints out of the public square and sends a very clear message. Disagree with us and we will make your life unlivable. That's not democracy. It's a velvet form, gloved form of political thuggery. And the ideological roots run deep. Among the far left, communists, anarchists, and neo-Marxists, and certain anti-racism groups, there's an ingrained belief straight from the Marxist playbook that society is locked in an irredeemable class struggle. In this worldview, counter-revolutionaries or anyone who dares dissent are not just wrong; they are the enemy, not a political opponent to be debated, but a class enemy to be destroyed. The interesting part is that Charlie Kirk said himself that he was a counter-revolutionary.
Yeah. No, very interesting. Listen, we've got to go to the news, Daniel, but what's the name of your book and where can we get it? I'm sure there'll be people listening and watching who might want to read it.
It will be out in the next few days. It's called The New Red Threat, Britain's Far Left.
Okay, very, very interesting. Daniel, well done on writing a book. That is not an easy thing to do, and we wish you well with that. Thanks to Rob Hawkins in Portsmouth, who says, so Prince Andrew was basically finished and cast out as a working royal for his relationship with Epstein. So how could Mandelson ever carry on as a lord? Well, I suppose like being a prince, being a lord is a lifetime appointment, but certainly there are many people who feel that he shouldn't be in Labour anymore. Stephen Cambridge says, I hope when Trump visits next week, he tells Starmer that our special relationship is suspended on provision that Starmer calls an election. And Heather says we can't be happy in our country anymore with these stupid politicians making mistakes and not facing the consequences. Lots more to debate in the next hour. We've got a Conservative MP, Gregory Stafford, about this scandal at the Oxford Union. This is a student society that's meant to be a bastion of free speech in our society, who Charlie Kirk debated there, and what the incoming president appears to have celebrated the shooting, and that is something that Greg Stafford's very, very concerned about. We'll talk about the sport as well, and also the BBC censuring staff for calling Hamas a terror group. Yes, really, loads more to discuss. Get your call in 20344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company. Loads to discuss between now and Kevin O'Sullivan at 7 o'clock, including more detail that has come out on Charlie Kirk's assassination. The police and FBI believe they have their man in custody. We'll reflect on that. We'll also talk about what's been happening at one of our great universities, Oxford University, the Oxford Union, independent of the university, but nonetheless a world-famous speaking society. Richard Nixon, Michael Jackson, all sorts of people have spoken there over the years. Well, the incoming president of that student society appears to have celebrated the shooting of Charlie Kirk just months after debating with him in the Oxford Union. We'll talk to an MP, himself a former treasurer of the Oxford Union, who is very annoyed about that. We'll talk about that in just a second. This hour we'll talk about the sport as well. We'll also talk about the BBC censuring staff for calling Hamas a terror group. Guess what? They are a terror group, and actually their chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, this week called them a resistance movement. So if you can call them a resistance movement, why can't you call them what they are, which is a terrorist organisation? They are terrorists. Lots to discuss in all of that. 0344 499 1000, and that's before we even discuss Peter Mandelson and the great scandal there. I'll ask Gregory Stafford about that too. Plenty to talk about. Give me your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell on Twitter. You can send me a voice note. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, in the last hour and a half or so, the Utah Governor Spencer Cox has given an update on the hunt for Charlie Kirk's assassination. This is what he said.
We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident.
Well, that was the Utah Governor Spencer Cox. He also set out possible motives for the attack.
Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital OWO, what's this, question mark." Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO."
Well, earlier in the day, the President Donald Trump spoke to Fox News about his friend Charlie Kirk.
Any updates on the suspect?
Yeah. Can I always say, I think, just to protect us all, and so Fox doesn't get sued, and we all don't get sued, and everything else. But I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job.
Well, the reaction to this has been fascinating. There are many people who just very straightforwardly say this is a horrendous tragedy. It's dreadful. It's awful. Charlie Kirk was someone who inspired many, many people. He debated all sorts of people from all sorts of political persuasions, and he was someone who had opinions I sometimes didn't agree with. Does that matter? No, it doesn't. What happened was that Charlie Kirk wanted to debate people, and the greatest traditions of debating are and have been for over 150 years at the Oxford Union. That is the Student Debating Society at Oxford University. Well, now the incoming president, the person who will be president when the students, well, now as the students are coming back to Oxford, has appeared to celebrate the shooting of Charlie Kirk just months after debating with him himself. This is George Aberone, who shared comments after the free speech advocate and key Donald Trump ally was fatally shot in Utah. In messages seen by the Telegraph newspaper, Mr. Aberone posted, "Charlie Kirk got shot, let's effing go," which is a common celebratory phrase among Gen Z. Another message believed to be on his Instagram account stated, Charlie Kirk got shot, LOOOL, an exaggeration of the abbreviation, laugh out loud, of course. Messages were shared in a WhatsApp group for Oxford Union members, and at least one of the messages was soon deleted. This is something that is very, very serious, and the fact that this person, George Aberonier, is someone who debated Charlie Kirk, I think is even more poignant and even more apposite to talk about. Well, a former treasurer of that organisation is Gregory Stafford, the Conservative MP for Farnham and Borden. Gregory, good evening.
Good evening to you, Peter.
What is your reaction to this?
Well, first of all, can I just say my deepest condolences to all the friends of Charlie Kirk, and especially to his wife Erica and his children. I can't even imagine what they're going through. And it's even more shocking, as you've said, that the incoming president of what used to be the absolute bastion of free speech, indeed it was set up apart and separate from the university so that it could create a forum for free speech. The incoming president of that organisation has appeared to celebrate the death of someone who was advocating for free speech, and indeed someone he himself debated a couple of months ago. It's just absolutely shocking, and I have written to the authorities at the Oxford Union demanding that there's an investigation, because in my opinion, this incoming president really cannot take up that presidency. He is supposed to be representing a debating society that puts free speech above everything else, and instead he is celebrating the death of someone who has been killed because he has stood up for the rights of free speech and freedom.
Should be said the Oxford Union has put out a statement and says, we reaffirm our stance that the Oxford Union firmly opposes all forms of political violence and strongly stands by our commitment to free speech and considered debate. We would like to reiterate that our condolences lie with Charlie Kirk's family, especially his wife and young children who are enduring such terrible grief. It's very, very interesting that this, of course, has happened. And unfortunately, what has happened in many, many cases is not just that students are almost, well, he is clearly by those messages celebrating this, but there are many people in our own world, journalists and some politicians as well, who appear to have gone far beyond what they should say. There are occasions, as you know and I know, Gregory, where you should just sit down and say nothing if you've nothing nice to say. And I've been absolutely horrified by some journalists, one in particular, who've put all sorts of things on social media that really appear to say, well, he had it coming in regard to Charlie Kirk, which is just so awful. You can disagree with someone and still be appalled by the fact that they've been assassinated.
Well, absolutely. And again, it strikes me as absolutely bizarre and abhorrent that journalists who are, again, supposed to be impartial reporters of freedom and truth could possibly see any kind of upside in this tragic murder. And I think, to be frank, especially in America, but unfortunately here as well in Britain, we are seeing a really chilling air around free speech. And we need advocates, as you've said, whether we agree with what they're actually saying or not. But we need to support advocates who are standing up for freedom and free speech, because as humans, the only way that we can express our freedom and our liberty is through our speech. And if we stop that, then we as humans don't have freedom.
Given that freedom of speech, and given that there have been people such as the Vice President of the United States, J.D. Vance, and Trump himself, President Trump, have sounded the alarm over this, what do you think that says about the backdrop to the state visit next week, where, of course, President Trump, I'm sure, will continue to talk about Charlie Kirk?
Well, I mean, obviously there are significant international issues going on across the world, not least what's going on in Ukraine and indeed in Israel and Gaza. But I would be very surprised if the president doesn't raise some of these issues. And I think as the West, and as we have come together on something like Ukraine, I think we as the West need to come together on things like free speech, because if we're not going to defend them, as we as the Western nations are not going to defend free speech and stand up for it, then no one else is. And it's absolutely fundamental, not just to our way of life, but I think the way of life of the whole of the world, to stand up for freedom and free speech.
What do you make of how the Prime Minister has been dealing with the sacking of Peter Mandelson? There's still many questions there, some of which were asked by your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, on Wednesday. What's your reaction to that scandal?
Well, it is of no surprise to me that Peter Mandelson has ended up in a situation where once again he has been sacked from government. This man has a track record of making bad decisions, having dubious friends, and to be perfectly frank, not being fit for office. So I think it says a lot about Keir Starmer's own personal judgment that this is now in a long line of people he's appointed to senior positions, not least Angela Rayner, not least Tulip Sadiq, a whole host of ministers who have come up wanting. And not only should he have not put them in the first place, it's been the laxity and the slowness that has taken him to remove Peter Mandelson, which is a problem. And the only reason, let's be frank, the only reason he has had to do it is because Kemi Badenoch raised the issues so forcefully on Wednesday. He was, up to that point, expressing his full support for Peter Mandelson, which now we know is the kiss of death for any politician if you receive the...
Yes, I definitely don't want Keir Starmer to express full support for me.
But I think what we really need to understand is, what did Keir Starmer know at the point of this appointment? What did David Lammy, as the Foreign Secretary, what did the advisors at the Foreign Office tell both David Lammy and Keir Starmer?
On MI6 as well, as you say, many questions. Earlier on, about an hour ago, Gregory, the Labour MP Kim Johnson gave what I thought was a pretty honest interview to this programme about her leader and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer. I just want to remind ourselves of what she said and then get your reaction to it, Gregory.
Just one thing, we're just lurching from one crisis to another. And as I've just mentioned, Mandelson should never have been appointed, as you've just stated. It was known about his relationship, about him staying in the flat. The recent revelations that we've heard this week are unacceptable. And when you've got party loyalists coming out and defending the indefensible, I think is unacceptable. And it does bring into judgment, our Prime Minister's judgment in terms of some of these issues. And so we have been impacted quite negatively. People are not voting for Starmer. His popularity has, hit the floor. So something's not going right, and that needs to change.
I wonder what you make of what Kim Johnson said there, Gregory.
Well, I think she's absolutely right. We've had Louise Haigh, Tulip Sadiq, Rashana Ali, Angela Rayner, now Peter Mandelson, all of whom have been appointed by Keir Starmer, pretty much knowing what their peccadillos, and in some cases in Louise Haig's case, crime, were, and yet he has appointed them in the first place. And then once that's been exposed, has dithered and delayed. I think it's just two things. One, he either doesn't care what public think about him and his government, or he has decided that it doesn't matter whether or not he loses people from his government. And if I were some of his front bench colleagues, I think of Mike Tapp, the newly appointed Home Office Minister, who had to go out and defend the government and Peter Mandelson in the morning, only to discover that Peter Mandelson was then sacked later. I would be absolutely livid. And from my colleagues that I speak to, Labour colleagues that I speak to, they are extraordinarily disappointed with the way that Keir Starmer
is your leader doing any better, Gregory Stafford? Because we have many polls that say that the Conservatives are in third place, languishing around 16–70% in the polls. Because I think she did a reasonable job on Wednesday holding the Prime Minister to account, but really she's not being heard to a huge degree by the public. The attacks on the Labour Party that your party are making are often not being heard, or at least reacted to positively, by people in the country.
Well, I thought Kemi did a really good job on Wednesday, and I think it was really clear that Keir Starmer didn't have any answers to her. We are in a really difficult position as the Conservative Party. We've just left office. We've had one of the most historic defeats that we've had. So it is no surprise that we just need a period of time for the public to begin to trust us again. But what I really think is that over the next few months, as really this Labour government is really exposed on some of these really important things, the journalists, the media and the public hopefully will begin to see that there is real leadership from the Conservative Party on these key issues, but more importantly, I would say, on the real key issues that matter to the nation, whether that be foreign affairs, immigration, the health service. But we need a bit of time, and I'm confident that we will start to increase in the polls and get policies out there that the public really appreciate over the next coming months.
Gregory, thank you for speaking to me. That's Gregory Stafford, MP there. He's a Conservative MP for Farnham and Borden. We're going to be talking to Nicole Lampert in a second, the BBC censuring staff for calling Hamas a terror group. Spoiler alert, it is. Also, a man has been arrested after anti-Semitic attacks in North London, spreading apparently faeces across various buildings. Absolutely horrendous. And the Netherlands joining the Irish in a Eurovision warning, saying they won't take part in Eurovision if Ireland and the Netherlands saying that if Israel take part, they will not be. Lots to discuss. Get your thoughts on all of this as well. 0344 499 1000.
Crossed. He never much seems to care about what the outcomes are, as long as the process was followed. But it's now emerging, isn't it, that quite a lot of warnings were flagged up, unsurprisingly, about Peter Mandelson, and those were overridden by the Prime Minister and perhaps by the behest of Morgan McSweeney.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is is Talk.
John's in Yorkshire and has given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good afternoon, Peter. Firstly, can I just say it's an absolute pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks, John. You too.
I'd like to say that as a man in his 40s that can easily remember the miners' strike, because I'm in the heartland of what was the South Yorkshire coalfield, I find it very interesting and exciting of the forthcoming election. Probably, as Mike says, you know, it might even be earlier than 2029. But I certainly do feel that, you know, contrary to the popular myth, I feel that Nigel Farage, maybe in a coalition or not, will actually become the next Prime Minister.
Right, yeah. You think that's going to happen? And I wonder
I think I certainly believe he's got as good a chance as any.
And would you be happy to vote for him?
Absolutely. And I'm not a man that's ever voted before.
You've never voted before? You're in your 40s?
Absolutely.
Okay, why have you not voted before, John?
Because I see that the mainstream political parties are all the same. I see Keir Starmer. I don't see him as a man of Labour.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I see him more as a Tory.
Well, it's really interesting that Nigel Farage is inspiring you to actually go to the ballot box and vote for him. What is it about what Nigel Farage and Reform UK do that you think is different?
They speak a truth that other parties are not willing to speak, and if you speak them truths, you can end up in a lot of bother.
Yeah. John, really interesting to talk to you. Thank you for your call. John gave me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can do the same thing. I want to talk now about the BBC and what they have been saying to their staff. In fact, there was a complaint to their editorial complaints unit about a staff member who referred to Hamas as a terror group. They are a terror group. They're terrorists. That's what they are. And what they did on the 7th of October and subsequently to the people of Israel has been absolutely horrendous. And we know and have talked about the detail of that on a number of occasions. Nicole Lampert is a journalist who follows these things. I just wonder, given the large amount of controversy, Nicole, that the government has talked about in regard to the BBC, the fact that at the time Rishi Sunak says this is not a time for equivocation, we should call it out for what it is, urging the BBC to call the, Hamas terrorists in 2023 on the October 7th of attacks. David Cameron, the Foreign Secretary at the time, said maybe it's a moment actually for the BBC to ask itself again, shall we describe these people as terrorists? They are terrorists, and a blind man on a galloping horse can see this. But what appears to have happened, certainly over the last few days, is that the chief international correspondent, Lise Doucette, has referred to Hamas as a resistance group. But she won't call them terrorists. And in fact, you have people within the BBC who've been censured in order to do so, in order to dissuade them from actually doing so. What do you make of this, Nicole?
It's crazy that they would censure themselves for calling them what they are, a terror group. And Lise Doucette, meanwhile, who's calling them a resistance movement, seems to be absolutely fine with it. And what it means is that they're not treating them as terrorists. And we see that in their reporting, where actually they almost seem to believe Hamas figures more than they believe the IDF, which of course is the army of one of our allies and a democracy. So we have this weird disconnect where Hamas is a terrorist group who uses propaganda against Israel, and Israel and the BBC just basically parrots their lies, and they do that because they refuse to see them as a terror group, which is why they are angry with themselves that one of their reporters actually called them what they are, a terrorist organisation. And we've seen in the past that their head of news has tried to say, after they had did a documentary where they used the son of a Hamas politician and hadn't said who he was, and they had to pull that documentary down. And after that, you had the head of the BBC News trying to kind of make excuses for the news department by saying there's a difference between the political wing and the military wing of Hamas, whereas according to our own laws, there isn't. So the BBC is just in a terrible mess. And there's an article today by their BBC Verify, where nothing is verified, but basically the same old kind of spouting lies, where 80% of the article is probably pro-Hamas or at least anti-Israel, trying to make claims, and none of it is verified. So I guess in some ways we have this weird thing where the BBC isn't using words correctly. So it's calling Hamas a resistance movement rather than a terrorist organisation, and it's using something called BBC Verify when it's not actually verifying anything.
Although at the same time, the World Affairs editor of the BBC, John Simpson, said that it could not be seen to be taking sides. But your argument, Nicole, is that they have been doing that already simply by not calling Hamas terrorists, which they are.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're making a very strong decision there. And apparently this idea of not calling particularly Islamic organizations, Islamic extremists, terrorists, is about 10, 15 years old. That's all. It kind of happened because of that. They started not wanting to call them terrorists, and they said because they don't want to make judgments or somehow be seen as a kind of be aligned with our own state, the British state. But we, the British taxpayer, pay for the BBC, we pay for it to go out around the world, and one of the reasons we do that is we're meant to be spreading British democratic values, and that should include
and the truth.
Terrorists.
Yeah, and the truth as well. I wonder if I can ask you about the fact there's been an arrest after 4 synagogues and a private residence in Golders Green, a heavily Jewish area of North London, of course, had a substance smeared on them. We think this is actually excrement, liquid thrown at a school and over a car, and 2 other incidents. Police said they believe the same suspect was probably responsible for all of the offences they're looking into. They have arrested someone, but not, as far as we know, charged them. This is yet another example of the horrendous anti-Semitism that so many people, not just in our capital, but right across the United Kingdom, have faced, Nicole.
Yeah, excrement and urine, I'm afraid to say. I think that's all right to say.
Yeah, of course. No, you're fine. Yeah, that's factual, yeah.
A friend of mine, she's the grandmother of some children that go to, one of them was a kindergarten that he spread this stuff on. This has been going on for a couple of weeks now. Spread on doors and things like that, so it's unavoidable. The smell is horrendous, and it's very frightening. And yes, as you say, it's just the latest incident becoming more frightening. We had a gun pellet at someone being shot at someone in Bournemouth. We've had and you have the kind of nastiness that's happening there, but you also have kind of institutional, and I would say, going back to the BBC, that it's partly because of the BBC's reporting that we see this kind of material happening.
I wonder as well, just speaking of broadcasters, what you think of the Netherlands and a number of countries, Spain as well, the Netherlands, Ireland as well, saying that they don't want to be part of Eurovision if Israel are. I'm not sure what singers in Eurovision really have to do with the policies of Benjamin Netanyahu's government. And we see this time and time again, where anyone who is representing Israel in any way is held entirely responsible for the perceived or actual things that Benjamin Netanyahu does. It's the same as you or me, Nicole, being held responsible for everything Keir Starmer says.
Sorry.
Are you okay? Just take a breath there and take a little. We often get. I always keep a glass of water beside me. I know Nicole has her water bottle there. Is she okay? Can she answer? Has she got? Can we get her back to answer the question, Nicole? Just in regard to Eurovision, you feeling all right there?
I think so. Sorry.
Do you know what, Nicole? We'll leave it there. We'll talk on another occasion. But Nicole's just got a frog in her throat there. But certainly, my view anyway, in regard to the Netherlands joining RTE, the broadcaster in Ireland that is not happy with Israel in Eurovision. Well, I just think it's not fair to say to people who are representing their country that they are necessarily responsible in some way for what the government says or does. This idea of boycotting certain goods and services, for example, that Israel has, I also think is absurd as a policy. I've talked about that before. No doubt we'll talk to Nicole again. I'm sure she's absolutely fine. It's just that thing where you're talking a lot. I do it for 3 hours every evening, and you often sometimes just need a little glass of water. Well, we will talk to some of our viewers and listeners in just a second. If you want to use the break to get your call in, you can do so. If you want to react to perhaps something Nicole was saying, or indeed our MPs this afternoon. Really interesting what Gregory Stafford was saying there, and also Kim Johnson earlier on, very, very critical of Keir Starmer, despite being a member of his party, and many other people getting in touch as well. Heather says, I don't know why people can be so nasty, saying nasty things about Charlie Kirk's death. It's upsetting. These scumbags are so insensitive. It's not nice. Charlie Kirk's family is grieving. Please respect them. And Dawn in Chelmsford says, we live in worrying times where people celebrate the assassination of a decent man. They support prescribed terrorists. They condemn Israel. They want men to have access to female spaces. Where does it end, says Dawn. Well, plenty more opinions coming your way. As I say, you can use the break, pick up the phone, let us know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch, including an old lady in Warwickshire, she calls herself. I'm sure she's younger than she thinks. Peter, the posts you have just read out are absolutely horrid. The internet has a lot to answer for too. The internet has a lot to answer for. Starmer's police force are going to be busy and the jails are going to get full pretty quickly. Clive in Solihull says, please tell Gregory Stafford I will never trust the Conservative Party again. They're finished because they were useless for 14 years. Also have someone who's contacted me on, this is Bob in Cheltenham, who says, I'm not a fan of Peter Mandelson, but you cannot compare his serious errors of judgment with the accusations made against Prince Andrew, as someone did earlier on. Milo Tyndall says, it's not just Starmer, people loathe the whole lying cabinet. Another person says on Twitter, how many more resets do we have to suffer? It's a very good point. Adrian says, even the thickest Labour backbencher must surely know they will be toast at the next election, but they're still happy for the country to go down the drain in that time. If they do put the country before party or self, they would get the lying, deceitful Starmer out and see what the country really thought about them with an election now. Thank you to the person who says, just listening to Kim Johnson a little bit earlier on, I found it really strange and frankly difficult to believe her constituents in Liverpool are that vehement. Great show and nice to see you back on screen. Nicola from Norfolk, concerned about the government's policy on Gaza, given she also talks about the high levels of child poverty in her area. Does Gaza even feature as relevant? Paul and Fife, I think I've read that out earlier actually. Rob Hawkins in Portsmouth says, I'm afraid I don't understand why we are constantly told that it's not possible to dethrone a Labour leader. If you could, with your government expertise, can you please explain the situation? Rob, just briefly, yeah, and the Conservatives, essentially, you get the sort of very basic version is you get enough people, a certain proportion of the Conservative Party, and a leadership ballot is then held. With Labour, it's much more difficult. First, they're much more reluctant to do it, and also you have other people voting, not just MPs, and then with Conservatives, members as well. But with Labour, you've got members, you've got unions, you've got the usually happens at a party conference as well. It's a much longer process, and it is just more difficult within their rules to do so. If you really are interested, you could go on the Labour website and look at their constitution, but I think that's really properly cone-headed. That's the kind of thing that I would do. I remember I was chatting to Ian Collins a few days ago, maybe a week or two ago, and I said I'd read the regulations in regard to the proper disposal of American flags when they're a bit tatty, and that really revealed myself, I'm afraid. Let's talk to Lucy in Chelmsford, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. You can do this too. Lucy, great to talk to you. What would you like to say?
I was just saying, I'm from working class background. I was brought up on a very large council estate, single parent. But I thought working class meant you worked.
Yeah, yeah.
Not what Labour have got now, which is a benefit class.
Mm-hmm.
You know, working class is you went to work. We aspired to be, you know, to do something with our lives, to work, to provide for our families. I've been a single parent. I've never claimed benefits. I've always worked. And I know people that are working now who are living in garden sheds. They bed down every night in a shed because they cannot afford to rent a house in this area, but they're entitled to council help, but the council won't help them because they've got no stock because they're giving it to migrants.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, why are we housing people that aren't actually contributing anything? I know I work in education at the moment. I know people that have children just so they can stay on benefits. That's
dreadful. And as you say, the benefit system is there for people who, or it's supposed to be there for people who can't help themselves. I don't know about you, Lucy, but I've no problem with my taxes going to someone who's genuinely disabled, who can't work, and to help them live as good a life as they can.
I know people on benefits who go on holiday, they drive nice cars, they smoke, they drink.
Well, that's a sickener, isn't it, Lucy?
Can't afford to do that.
Well, it's an absolute sickener, and it shouldn't be allowed to happen. And I mean, do you ever think yourself sometimes, what am I doing this for?
Yeah, quite often. I just think this government they don't represent the working class because working class people work. Mm-hmm. The unions don't represent the working class anymore because the lowest paid working class people, which in education is the teaching assistants, the dinner ladies, those people, they can't afford to strike when there's a strike.
Yeah.
And they're not represented. So, you know, the railway workers are represented. They're not on a silly wage. The teachers generally are on a good wage. They can afford to strike, and they get help when they strike. But the actual workers, the people who do the job, don't get any help. You know, and also being a female, I don't feel that this government actually represent women or even respect women and girls at all.
How should they? What should they do to in order to respect women and girls?
They should make sure that they're safe. They're safe in education. They're safe, you know, in just in the normal everyday life, that they're not being attacked, that their views are listened to and they're not demeaned, that children are looked after. You know, Keir Starmer, well, his record on looking after young girls and things like that isn't really anything to be very proud of, is it?
It's really interesting, Lucy, that nothing you've said there strikes me in any way unreasonable. It doesn't strike me. These are basic, straightforward things that you're asking for your government. You're not asking for the world. You're not asking for, you know, a massive house and a huge pay rise and 3 holidays a year. You're not asking for that. You're just asking for basic things. And
even when you say about girls, did you know that if, well, I don't know if it's still the case, but up until recently, if a girl under the age of 16 has sex, so a 13-year-old has sex with a boy of 18 or a man of 20, if he says she's given consent, then they generally don't prosecute.
That's correct.
They're saying, well, it's a very difficult area. I'm sorry, she's not old enough to give consent.
Yeah.
That's rape. That's rape. We should be prosecuting.
Listen, I totally agree with you, and I think there need to be far more stringent views on that, far more stringent laws on that. Lucy, thanks. I think you've spoken really, really well today, and you've given us a real sense of the frustration that so many people have about the basic things that our government isn't giving us and isn't providing, and we pay a lot of tax in order to do so. I'm sure Lucy pays a lot of tax as someone who's working as well. Chris in Epsom is our next caller, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Chris, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Well, first of all, I have to say they won't be listening, but my condolences to Charlie Kirk's family. What happened there is really a and insight into what's happening here. And although, like the post that you said, you read out earlier, people celebrating his death, and the internet plays a part. The internet only disperses people's thoughts.
Yeah.
And the problem really lies in the education system, both here and in America. Now, in America, they've been infiltrated by Antifa. And the teachers, I mean, there's been quite a few teachers sacked because they've been celebrating Charlie's death. And you had Ian had on a chap from America saying this was the major problem, that it was causing this. They were almost justifying violence against a fascist or a far right, which they call everybody.
Yeah.
And
well, there've been media organisations here in the UK who have referred to Charlie Kirk as far right.
Yeah, no, I haven't read them, but
I can't think of anything. I've seen many things in the last couple of days that he has said, written, broadcast. Yes, some of his views are quite strong on things like abortion, for example, that I disagree with him on. They're not far right by any stretch of the imagination.
No, he was called an extremist in one of the papers as well.
Yeah.
The thing is that over here, we now have the NUC that took over from the NUT.
Mm-hmm.
At that conference in Bournemouth last year, they actually had a discussion and worked out how they could bring the Palestinian argument into the classroom.
Yeah, I remember covering that at the time, and I just thought, what on earth has that got to do with the education of our children? And there are a lot of militant unions. The NEU is one of them. There's also the British Medical Association. There's a core part of that is a radical group of leftists, and they're not interested in, I would argue anyway, in making people better. They're not interested, the NEU, this faction anyway, in teaching children correctly. What they're interested in is their own political agenda, and that's something that should be kept out of schools and kept out of hospitals.
Well, it's indoctrination, and the thing is that when you roll that back, when you start peeling the onion off, the layers, then you get to really we go back to Blair, and every Labour PM that was a member of the Fabian Society, and the current members, Starmer, Hermer, Calm, and the rest, and the Miliband brothers, and then you look at the Matrix chambers. This is. I know people say, that's just a conspiracy theory. That's just, Ian poo-pooed me a couple of weeks ago.
Well, there's a clear line between, I'm not saying every single person involved in Matrix Chambers is someone who is dodgy or has an agenda necessarily, but what I think you're saying there is there's a connection between a lot of these people. There's a connection between an idea of what the country should be. They're perfectly entitled, if they're democratically elected, to put that forward. We're all entitled to our opinion. What they're not entitled to is their own facts, and what they're not entitled to is to indoctrinate kids, as you say.
I mean, the thing is that the way I look at it, I mean, I come from a staunch Conservative family, although I'm reformed now. I remember growing up, my near family were staunch Labour. Mm-hmm. Now, I know that they'd be twisting in their graves if they could see what's going on now. Mm-hmm. And that your Kim that you had on earlier reminded me of what a real Labour politician is like, and Kate Hoey does as well. They're real Labour. What we've got now is not. They're a Marxist, separatist, central control of everything.
I don't know if I'd describe Keir Starmer as a Marxist. I don't think he's a Marxist.
Well, I listened to Peter Hitchens, and he went to university with him, and he said he was further left than Corbyn.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all had views at university that were maybe a bit different to what people do change their minds. But listen, Chris, really interesting call. We've got to move on because we've got to do the sport and go to a break, but I really appreciate you giving me a ring, and it's always interesting to talk to you. There's Chris in Epsom there. Just before we do, I'll just read out a couple more message. Jeff says Lucy Powell is a disgrace. She insulted every victim of the grooming gangs, victims with her dog whistle comments. She should have been sacked by Starmer as soon as she made that dog whistle remark. Absolutely disgusting. And one more before the break. Brad says 11 days ago Keir Starmer made a big display of announcing phase 2 of his plans for governing the country. In the 11 days since then, he's lost his deputy prime minister, been forced to completely reshuffle his front bench, and now he has needed to sack the ambassador to the USA. I really can't wait for phase 3. We'll talk perhaps a bit more about that and get the sport in just a minute here on Talk.
Keir Starmer was sort of adamant in his very legalistic way that all due process had been followed. We have followed the process to the last jot, dot and comma. Every I was dotted and every T was crossed. He never much seems to care about what the outcomes are as long as the process was followed. But it's now emerging, isn't it, that quite a lot of warnings were flagged up, unsurprisingly, about Peter Mandelson, and those were overridden by the Prime Minister and perhaps by the behest of Morgan McSweeney.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to everybody who has been in touch. Lots of reaction to the last caller as well. Sharon says, hi Cardi P, great show. I agree with the last chap. My dad was staunch Labour. He would be utterly ashamed now. And Angie says, just a quick message, Cardi P. All those people attending the march in London tomorrow, please keep it peaceful. Do it in the name of Charlie Kirk. Freedom of speech should never be suppressed. Do the march with respect. We cannot be allowed to be silenced. And yes, there is a big march. We'll be covering it on my programmes tomorrow. I'm on between 10 and 1 tomorrow and Sunday, so lots to discuss then. But for the meantime, let's talk about the sport.
Sports news from The Sun.
Well, Dean Scoggins is with us. He's Deputy Head of Sport at The Sun. Great to see you again, Dean. How are you doing?
Thanks, yeah, all good, thank you.
Strong words from the former Watford striker Troy Deeney about the Premier League Hall of Fame. This is in his exclusive column for Sun Sport. What's he been saying?
Yeah, I mean, you talk about freedom of speech, and Troy's absolutely gone for it. Yeah, absolutely right. It's a fantastic read, and it's something that we've been talking about. A lot of our readers have been talking about for quite some time. So the Premier League Hall of Fame, it's a public vote. They induct over different months players and legends have gone by into the Premier League Hall of Fame. And one person who Troy points out has not yet been included is Ryan Giggs. Now, obviously, one of the best Premier League players, if arguably you could say the best, definitely the most decorated. His off-field controversies, we should say. 2 years ago, he was cleared of allegations that he assaulted his ex-girlfriend and her sister after the charges were withdrawn by the CPS. So Troy makes the point that obviously, yes, there were off-field controversies, but people like Eric Cantona, John Terry, they were quite familiar with off-field controversies as well.
Yeah.
And they are in the Hall of Fame. So it's a great debate. It's one of, I think, where's your line? Where's your line on where the football crosses into what happens off the field?
Yes, no, you mentioned John Terry there, no stranger to controversy, and certainly, you know, a Hall of Fame, what's that for? What's the whole point of it? Very, very interesting. Manchester United, they've changed their goalkeepers in the window there, the transfer window. What did their manager Ruben Amorim have to say about the outgoing goalkeeper Andre Onana?
Yeah, so now Andre Onana, to the relief of most fans, has gone. So Amorim has spoken out. You wouldn't expect him to speak about the player whilst he was still there, but now he's gone. He's gone to Trabzonspor in Turkey. Basically, Amorim has said that he couldn't handle the pressure of being at Manchester United. It's a different case, but then kind of contradicting himself. He's bought a new goalkeeper, Sene Lammens, who is very young, but now he's going to play Altay Bayindir, who's been the understudy to Onana instead. So there's still a goalkeeping situation. There's a huge game at the Etihad on Sundays, the Manchester derby. I actually did my tactics show on how the two goalkeepers will adapt under the pressure of that, so people can go and watch that if they want to. And yeah, we'll see how Gianluigi Donnarumma, which is a bit of a mouthful, starts at Manchester City, and then Bayindir is now the man under pressure at Man United.
Friend of the station as well, former England manager Harry Redknapp has said he wants to raise the profile of Oh, it says here he was a former England manager. Apparently he wasn't.
No.
Incorrect. Apologies for that. Harry Redknapp has said he wants to raise the profile of a forgotten sport. What could we see? Which sport is this making a popular comeback?
It's Speedway. It's amazing. So
wow.
Speedway has sort of disappeared from the consciousness. Used to be on World of Sport and, you know, loads of viewers, you know, and Harry says here he used to take in a great friend of ours at the Sun, and as you say, of Talk and the Show, and he used to take his sons to watch the Speedway. He's now joined the management team of Speedway Futures Limited to try and give it, obviously, the publicity that comes with Harry. He wants to get it back into the public conscience, and, you know, as he says, these guys go from 0 to 60 quicker than a Formula 1 car and with no brakes. So,
there we are.
you know, they're pretty brave, these guys, and it is a great spectacle. But unfortunately, throughout the the early noughties, those Speedway venues closed down. So, but there are still big ones out there, and Harry is promising to play his part in raising the profile again.
Great stuff, Dean. Thank you very much. That's Dean Scoggins, Deputy Head of Sport from the Sun, on a big weekend, of course, coming ahead, as he says. Thank you to Dean. Just back to Charlie Kirk as well. We just want to remind you of what the Utah governor said about Charlie Kirk's the alleged assassin's family, turning him in to the police.
Investigators reviewed additional video footage from UVU surveillance and identified Robinson arriving on UVU campus in a gray Dodge Challenger at approximately 8:29 a.m. on September 10th, in which he is observed on video in a plain maroon t-shirt, light-colored shorts, a black hat with a white logo, and light-colored shoes. When encountered in person by investigators in Washington County on September 12th in the early morning hours, Robinson was observed in consistent clothing with those surveillance images. Investigators interviewed a family member of Robinson who stated that Robinson had become more political in recent years. The family member referenced a recent incident in which Robinson came to dinner prior to September 10th, and in the conversation with another family member, Robinson mentioned Charlie Kirk was coming to UVU. They talked about why they didn't like him and the viewpoints that he had. The family member also stated Kirk was full of hate and spreading hate. The family member also confirmed Robinson had a gray Dodge Challenger.
Well, that was the the current governor of Utah talking about what has happened there. Jeremy has been in touch with a voice note. Let's hear what Jeremy has to say.
I've listened and followed Charlie Kirk's opinions for many years, often been very offended as a member of the gay community where he says, you're better than this, it's the wrong path, and compared us to alcoholics and drug addicts and things like that. Yes, I've been deeply offended. I've been deeply offended all my life of people who've told me things like that. But I would never wish death on anybody. And for people to celebrate it, it's just so sad. Nobody deserves that for an opinion. And I wish his family all my prayers.
Jeremy, great message. And yeah, just no one has the right not to be offended. And I've been offended by all sorts of things I've heard, seen, been debated at, told, you know, every day on, and I'm not moaning about this, I'm just saying factually, every day for my opinions on things like Twitter, people slag me off, say horrible things and all the rest of it. You just get on with it because they're entitled to their opinion. They're not entitled to their own facts, as some of them have. But I think that Jeremy makes a really, really good point there, and we do need to find a way to disagree agreeably. Rich has been in touch with a voice note on Keir Starmer as well.
I'm not too hot on the comings and goings of inner government, but because Keir Starmer is so a pig-headed liar, if he felt the walls closing in and the ranks turning on him, could he call a general election just to spite them, or is there more to it than that?
It's a fair point, Rich. I mean, I do think the next general election will be in 2029. I think that's the most likely thing to happen, and the Prime Minister, that's one of the real powers that he or she has, in that they can call an election basically when they want to, and actually the Fixed Term Parliaments Act, which the Liberal Democrats wanted, that's gone. Thank you to Joanna in Salisbury, who says, hi Cardi P, Ireland won't take part in Eurovision if Israel do. They should not be allowed to dictate who is competing, one less on the board. England might win. And actually, really interestingly, I was just messaging Nicole Lambert there to make sure she's okay after her coughing fit there, and she said that Germany have said that they will pull out if Israel are not included, so good for Germany. Clive in Solihull says, please tell Gregory Stafford I will never trust the Conservative Party again, they were useless for 14 years. And Bill's got a great one. He says, just a point on the importance of voting. I was a soldier for 25 years. I stood up for this country to help ensure our freedoms remain. I would urge everyone to vote. Don't mind who for, just vote, please, says Bill. I totally agree with that, Bill. I actually think there should be a box for none of the above, but you have a really, really good point. I think we have a duty, we have rights as citizens. We were talking about that a little bit earlier on, but we also have responsibilities, and one of them is, I think, to get out to vote and to make sure that no matter who you vote for, you make your voice heard, and that's something I feel really, really strongly about. Lots more to discuss: Eurovision, Peter Mandelson, Charlie Kirk and the suspect there as well. We'll talk to Max Thompson in just a second. He's a spokesman for the Free Speech Union and Trump's former campaign chairman will join us too in the next hour, right up to Kevin O'Sullivan. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good evening, this is Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell here on Talk. Thanks so much for your company. We're going to be talking about free speech in this country, the real worries that many people have over its erosion and what we can do about it. We're also going to be talking about the Oxford Union. Their president has said that Charlie Kirk, who was assassinated, was a good thing. He appeared to celebrate the shooting there, the suspect in custody. We've also had a number of celebrities, some journalists who should know better as well, talking about this. And now Nadia Hussein has sparked fury as the former BBC star has branded Charlie Kirk a bigot in a gross social media post after his death. We'll talk to Rick Gates as well, Trump's former campaign chairman, later this hour. We'll take a look inside the Sun and we'll have lots of your opinions coming up too. If you want to get your voice on the air in the next 57 minutes before Kevin O'Sullivan takes over, and you can talk to me by giving me a ring. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell, send me a voice note, less than a minute please, send me a WhatsApp text message, or you can give me a ring, as I say, 0344 499 1000. Let's speak to Max Thompson now. Max is a spokesman for the Free Speech Union. Great to have you in the studio. How are you this evening?
Very well. Great to be with you, Peter.
There's so many stories around. Let's start with this Oxford Union president who actually debated Charlie Kirk, appearing to celebrate the shooting, sending a number of messages to a WhatsApp group and on Instagram as well. It's just awful, especially when you remember the institution, a bastion of free speech, or meant to be a bastion of free speech, that he represents. And of course Charlie Kirk personified someone who really deeply cared about free speech. We may not have agreed with him, doesn't matter. And this, there've just been a number of people, there've been celebrities, we'll talk about Nadia Hussein as well, who appear to have sort of celebrated this or in some way condoned it. It just seems horrible.
I mean, there's no other way to put it. It's just disgusting. If you have nothing nice to say, you shouldn't say things. But I guess the fundamental point is here that Charlie would always argue is people have a right to free speech. My view is totally reprehensible, and if I was in that position, I mean, Peter, I don't think either you or me would ever dream in our wildest days of saying anything like that. And I think it is incumbent on George, the president-elect, to really reflect on himself and if he can continue on. But as the founder and general secretary of the Free Speech Union, Toby Young, has said today, Charlie wouldn't really appreciate that, deplatforming someone and hounding them out of office for what we have assessed as lawful speech, though incredibly distasteful, though disgusting, abhorrent, and just mind-boggling why anyone would ever do that. It's up to George as to whether he believes his position is tenable. So
what about Nadia Hussein there? Should she have lost her job because of Charlie Kirk's murder? She called him a bigot. And this has been a social media post there. What do you make of Nadia Hussein? Because there are many people who are very, very understandably very angry with her sentiments. Totally, and I think that anger is felt broadly and rightly, because no one in their right mind wants someone has a father, a 31-year-old father, who put his neck on the line, went out and fought for core values of freedom of speech, for freedom, for civilization, and tried his best. I mean, no one has energized more people, young people, to engage with the democratic process in the United States and over here in the UK as Charlie. I mean, President Trump is totally correct in saying that he is a martyr of truth and a martyr of free speech. And I've been looking back at the videos that Charlie's been putting out with Turning Point, and never once did you ever hear him raise his voice. Even if someone had a totally opposed view to him, would he ever go? He wanted you to engage with the process, see his point of view, hopefully come over to it, but it's not the end of the world if you don't, because you've engaged in the process. The fact that he was murdered for that is a real stain on any liberal democracy. It is disgusting. And the likes of Nadia Hussein to go out and say that, it proves his point, doesn't it? Once you stop talking, as Charlie said, that is when really bad things start happening. And it's totally true. I think that she has really let herself down here, and she should reflect. And to go along with saying, I believe her post was, why is it when a white man is murdered,
do people cry outrage and shock, but when 20,000 girls and children are there, why are we conflating the two?
Well, you can also say that the two things are both bad.
Yeah.
Simply because you're not talking about one of them for a few minutes doesn't mean that you don't think that Gazan children dying is a bad thing, which of course it is. And the humanitarian catastrophe there is something we've discussed many, many times, as has the rest of the media. And I do find that is, I mean, my strongly held personal belief would be that Nadia Hussein's tweet is actually racist in itself as well, because she is essentially saying that we put more value on the life of one white man. He was a very, very well-known man who happened to be white. She is entitled to her opinion, but I just wonder why on earth she would have felt that was an appropriate thing to do.
Well, I mean, I don't want to know what the inner workings of her head was with doing that. I think it's just disgusting. And as I said, to conflate those two things, but I think it's typical of looking at what sadly is, at the moment, predominantly, it's on the left, isn't it? You have numerous politicians on the left and commentators sniping in when they don't agree with someone and calling them a fascist and a Nazi, without any sort of recognition of what a real Nazi is, what a real fascist is. It debases it, it's offensive, but more than anything, it is deeply dangerous. And Charlie Kirk's murder is testament to what happens when people start throwing out these outlandish views. I mean, I believe that the man that, well, young boy, the 22-year-old that has turned himself in for killing Charlie, now was inscribed on one of the bullets that shot him, "Hey, fascist." I mean, come on. It's sickening.
We don't know what was going through his head, certainly. No. I mean, do you honestly think that that this atmosphere being created by the left, as you say it has been, actually led to that in some way?
Yeah, I think, and again, you can say it with other situations on the right as well. Look at the murder of Joe Cox back in 2016. It's something that I fear that the public of any country has an incredibly short memory of the horrors of this. And these are people, Charlie, Joe, Sir David Amos, who put themselves on the line, their head above the parapet, and go on and devote themselves to a life of public service and trying to help people. And this is what you get? It's disgusting.
How great a threat do you think there is to free speech in this country in general?
I think we're on a very, very dark path. You can see with the Free Speech Union's membership numbers just skyrocketing up, and you look at the different cases of Graham Linehan, an Irish citizen that lives in America, lands in the UK at Heathrow Airport, and 5 armed guards with submachine guns take him off for 3 tweets that he posted in the state of Arizona. That is deeply concerning. The Prime Minister, with his mealy-mouthed responses to whenever he is questioned about free speech there, he looks so awkward. He said, we've had free speech in this country for a long time. We don't. And the fact is, as I've consistently said in conversations over the last couple of weeks, the fact that the US Vice President J.D. Vance at the Munich Security Conference stood there and questioned the UK's commitment to the core hallmark value of any Western liberal democracy, free speech, it's a badge of shame that the Prime Minister should be wearing. And I fear that we are losing one of the staples to be a successful Western liberal democracy. I mean, people die for free speech, as we've seen. I mean, these values are hard fought for and easily lost unless we stand up for them.
And how are you standing up for them? What can we do to fight back, especially in Graham Linehan's case? Is the Free Speech Union working with him?
We are working with Graham. So we are helping him with a crowdfunder to now sue the Met Police for wrongful arrest and false imprisonment. And arguably it's defamation as well. This man's name has been dragged through the mud. And this is for a social media post. You look at it in the UK, back onto your point as well, if we do have a free speech crisis in this country, over 30 people a day are arrested for online posts. That happens when burglaries go unsolved, when rapes, people are waiting for the trials until 2028, 2029.
There are people, though, who incite hatred online, for example. Should they not be arrested?
Yeah, and there's a very, very fine line with this, and it's a very difficult one to go on, but Graham Linehan, to punch he's a comedian, isn't he? So to punch a trans woman who is refusing to leave one of the bathrooms, and he said it's abuse, it was clearly meant in a jovial sense of the way, but it's a more serious point here that we're going along. He wasn't specifically saying that's Joe Bloggs over there. You need to go punch her in the balls at, say, 6:37 on Friday the whatever. That is where the line is drawn, and there's clear legal things there, but above anything, we just need to go back to a common sense approach. I mean, people have free speech, but people, and no one has the right to not be offended, but everyone has the right to free speech. I think we just need to go back and look at it ourselves and just adopt a common sense approach.
It's interesting, actually, that the head of the Metropolitan Police would agree with you to some extent, especially over Graham Linehan, that the government either needs to clarify the law or legislate on it, because he feels his officers have been caught in the middle of all of this. I just wonder what legislation you think there should be and how that would work.
Well, you know, we'll see what Sir Mark Rowley puts out and his suggestions to the new Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood. But what I fear more than anything is that we're not going to see any legislation. What we are going to see is a back and forth between the Met Police and the government and Parliament, and it's going to be a game of ping pong. The public don't want that. They need to set out the priorities. I mean, I am greatly refreshed to see Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, say we need to police our streets, not our tweets. I mean, flattered that he's taken on the Free Speech Union slogan on that. But again, I want to see a clear plan from these politicians, because endless wars of words between these two institutions are not what the people want.
I've just been hearing that James Price, who's a former special advisor to the government, he was a former president, actually, of the Oxford Union. He has resigned as the honorary secretary of the Oxford Literary Debating and Union Trust. That's the charity that owns the Oxford Union's buildings and dispenses his charitable responsibilities. He has said on Twitter, the callousness of the new union president-elect has shocked me, but I also can't accept the lack of intervention on the issue. The trust is full of the most incredible people. I hope this ultimately helps in a tiny way a great British institution that I care so much about. And the former Chancellor Nadeem Zahawi, who was James Price's former boss, has endorsed that decision. I wonder what you make of that development.
I mean, looking at it personally, I can see why James has gone, and arguably I would go as well. I didn't go to Oxford, I must admit. I think that, as I've said before, the President-elect needs to reflect on his position now and the actions. Though what he said in the mirror out of it all was lawful, it's deeply disgusting, it's deeply reprehensible, and it's not befitting, in my opinion, of that. But then again, Charlie would say, more than anything, he's warned us of these idiots, you know, that if you're not willing to engage in debate, he now has to suffer the consequences of his actions and his words. And that is, at the end of the day, free speech.
Thank you very much indeed. That is Max Thompson, their spokesman for the Free Speech Union. What do you think about what Max has been saying there? 0344 499 1000. Nick's been in touch and says, I completely disagree with you over voting. I'm 57. I've never voted. The problem is the vast majority of people in Parliament are the very people who should be nowhere near government. They're only interested in themselves and climbing up the ladder to the next pay grade. Not for me. Nick, why don't you stand yourself? What about that? Maybe you could be someone I admire, anybody who stands for Parliament from whatever party. Dan in Kent says, I pray the police get it right tomorrow, Peter, and make sure the counter-protesters are kept away. And on Eurovision, someone says at least this year's Eurovision won't go on for hours and hours and hours if Israel are the only country taking part. Time to give the elbow, especially when countries hate each other so much nowadays. And on Charlie Kirk as well, Lucy's been in touch. Say on Charlie Kirk, you said, as you said, did not agree with everything he said, just like I have no love for our Prime Minister or agree with him at all, but I never want anything like that to happen or even think that was the answer in any way. I like Charlie Kirk. I would have loved to have spoken with him. R.I.P. All the very best, says Lucy. Lots to discuss on all of this. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000. We're going to speak to Rick Gates in a second. He's Trump's former campaign chairman on the Charlie Kirk assassination. Some developments will bring you right up to date and all of that. Stay with us here on Talk.
I think it is very, very unlikely that anyone would have prevented the Prime Minister seeing that security information, which we're now being told contained information about Mandelson's ongoing relationship with Epstein. And that's to say that the Prime Minister actually knew about this all along.
Yeah.
I think that casts major doubt over his judgment, and he has enormously serious questions to answer. So what we're going to try and do is we're going to push the government to publish that information, put it on the public record so we can all see who knew what when.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a bit of breaking news for you now on Talk. 9 Metropolitan Police officers have been suspended. This is after an investigation by the BBC. They've referred, the Metropolitan Police has referred itself to the watchdog following an investigation into what has happened at Charing Cross Station between August 2024 and January this year. The Independent Office for Police Conduct says it's investigating the behaviour of 11 individuals based in the central London station. The accusations, I should say, include excessive use of force, discriminatory and misogynistic comments, failing to report or challenge inappropriate behaviour as well. These are 9 officers ranging in rank from police constable to sergeant, and they're said to have taken place both on and off duty between the time period I mentioned there a second ago, and the IOPC previously found disgraceful behaviour in the ranks at the same police station, including a homophobic, racist and misogynistic WhatsApp group. So that is the breaking news, that 9 Metropolitan Police officers have been suspended, and the force has referred itself to the watchdog following an investigation by the BBC into what happened in Charing Cross Station. If there are any developments on that between now and 7, of course we'll bring them to you. But let's talk about another law enforcement agency. This is the FBI, and in the last couple of hours the Governor of Utah, Spencer Cox, has given an update on what has happened in regard to Charlie Kirk. He was the influencer, the much more than an influencer, of course, although he used the internet very, very effectively to argue for free speech, to argue for reasonable debate. He was assassinated 2 days ago, and the Utah Governor, Spencer Cox, has been giving an update. Let's hear what Governor Cox has to say.
We got him. On the evening of September 11th, a family member of Tyler Robinson reached out to a family friend who contacted the Washington County Sheriff's Office with information that Robinson had confessed to them or implied that he had committed the incident.
Well, he also set out possible motives for the attack.
Investigators noted inscriptions that had been engraved on casings found with the rifle. Inscriptions on a fired casing read, "Notices, bulges, capital OWO, what's this question mark?" Inscriptions on the 3 unfired casings read, "Hey fascist, exclamation point, catch, exclamation point." Up arrow symbol, right arrow and symbol, and 3 down arrow symbols. A second unfired casing read, "Oh Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Bella Chow, Chow Chow." And a third unfired casing read, "If you read this, you are gay, LMAO."
Well, earlier today, President Trump spoke to Fox News about his friend Charlie Kirk.
Any updates on the suspect?
Yeah. Can I always say, I think, just to protect us all, and so Fox doesn't get sued, and we all don't get sued, and everything else. But I think with a high degree of certainty, we have him in custody, right? In custody. Everyone did a great job. We worked with the local police, the governor. Everybody did a great job.
Well, Rick Gates is with us now. He's the former campaign chairman of Trump's campaign. Rick, thank you for joining me this evening. It is just absolutely unspeakably horrific what has happened to Charlie Kirk. What sort of a contribution did Charlie Kirk make, not just to getting President Trump elected, but also to the discourse in American politics, do you think?
Yeah, it's great to be with you, Peter. I mean, there's so many things to say about Charlie and his work and his principles and values and what he believed in. You know, I worked with Charlie in 2016. He was a young kid coming into our campaign who, you know, for the first time meeting Donald Trump, you know, was kind of just so excited to meet him. This was an opportunity that Charlie was going to be able to do some good work that he felt, you know, for the country. And he comes in and says, hey, we're going to recruit all these youth voters, you know, for Trump. And if you know anything about politics at that time in 2016, in our country, the youth typically don't go out to vote. So we're kind of, you know, laughing a little bit about, you know, Charlie's big plan here because we don't think there's much chance of success. And he took it from 2016 to 2024 and was able just to put together a program that really was his vision, his dream, and absolutely executed on it. And there's no question it had an impact on the election in 2024. But the reality is, all through that work, you know, Charlie, he never tried to win arguments. He was always trying to win hearts and minds. And you can, you know, debate about the techniques that he used and everything and how he challenged people and everything, but his underlying motives were incredibly pure. They incredibly about finding the truth and talking to people and engaging people. You know, a lot of people didn't understand him. The one thing he loved to do was learn. He loved to be able just to talk to people, debate people, because even in those instances, he was able to pick up things that maybe he didn't even know. And so I think when you look at it, you know, holistically, it's not just the person that was obviously killed. It was part of a movement. And the question now for us as a country is, where do we go in this, you know, kind of environment of political violence? You know, my hope is that Charlie's sacrifice will lead others to strive, you know, to really seeking political tolerance instead of political violence.
Do you think he would have gone far as perhaps an elected person himself? Was that something he discussed with you or had ambitions to do you think?
Yeah, actually, no, I don't think he would have ever run for political office, to be honest. He mentioned on several times how he was able to impact more people kind of on the outside, what he would be able to do in terms of his close relationship, you know, with God. And that work was, in his mind, on behalf of God. He was working as a messenger, you know, to a specific subset of people, the youth in our country. But as a result of that, he touched so many other people, so many other lives.
I wonder what you think it says about the state of debate in America, about the hatred that is there. We don't know what was going through the suspect's mind when he allegedly shot Charlie Kirk. We don't know that, but what we do know is that we have some evidence of some of the horrendous things that were written on casings, that were written on the rifle that was apparently used here. What do you think all of that says about the level of hatred that is out there?
I think it's incredibly high, and I think that this is an inflection point for our country and maybe for other people in the world to see of which direction are we going to go in? Are we going to continue to rage and specifically go after political violence, or is this an opportunity now to carry kind of Charlie's legacy and his mantle forward? And if there's anything that Charlie would want from what happened, it would be peace, it would be reconciliation, it would be tolerance. That is exactly what he was kind of promoting. And so I think as we look at this and move forward, obviously there's a legal process to go through, but you know, even with the president last night saying, look, you know, we need peace in this situation, the governor of Utah asking for the same thing. My hope is that we do that and we don't see an increased amount of political violence because of this, because that would just tarnish the work that Charlie has done.
I wonder, Rick, here in the UK, of course, we're preparing for the visit of President Trump. A state visit is happening, his second one as US president. It is something that we are very proud to do. A lot of the pomp and circumstance, the music, the guards, the parades that happen are something I think in this country we do that very few other countries around the world do well. I wonder, Rick, just the political controversy, of course, that is happening. Keir Starmer under a lot of pressure, but a lot of that is to do with the fact that our ambassador to your country, to the United States, Lord Mandelson, has had to be sacked. What do you make of that, and how big a story is it in America? What sort of impact do you think it will have, and how will Donald Trump be thinking or responding about this, do you think?
Well, having lived in the UK twice and understanding and participating in British politics, I saw it as a headline, the day of, Charlie Kirk's event. And so in the US, it got very little attention. But I think it will pick up, when other stories, kind of dissipate. The Epstein issue is still front and center. Obviously, your government, your prime minister chose to do what they did for their reasons. I don't think it'll have an impact on relations between our two countries. I think those have actually been kind of reformed quite a bit over the last several months, specifically with the trade deal, and then of course the state visit, which I can tell you the president is very much looking forward to and very excited about.
Does it matter who the US ambassador to the United States is? Nigel Farage, for example, the Reform UK leader, has suggested that he could do it.
Yeah, ultimately, I don't believe it does, as long as that person is willing to engage with government. I think our government, with President Trump and your prime minister's relationship, having gone through some bumps along the way, I would say that it's in a pretty good place right now. And I would say that as long as that ambassador is representative of those issues that were important, keeping in mind that the president here has his agenda and those match up to some extent, I don't think it'll be a problem. But certainly, I don't think Keir Starmer is planning to put anybody controversial in that role, just given the delicate balance of our relationship right now.
Rick, thank you for your thoughts this evening. That's Rick Gates there, who is Donald Trump's former campaign chairman. What do you think about all of this? The state visit, of course, coming up next week. We'll bring you full coverage here on Talk. Lots of people getting in touch about all sorts of things, including the political controversy that we've talked about previously in the programme. Hans has been in touch and says, good afternoon, Peter. I believe it is safe to say that the UK has become rudderless politically under our present Prime Minister. What must surely be of great concern is the large number of young people and millionaires who have decided enough is enough and are leaving this country. Thank you to Chris, who says, listening to Kim Johnson a bit earlier on, she's now just fighting for a seat. She won the last election. Labour, like the Tories, are a finished party. She might feel better going to Reform UK, who are going in the right direction. Well, I did ask her whether she'd think about going to Jeremy Corbyn's party. She says she's been in the Labour Party for a very, very long time and is going nowhere. Neil, in what he calls Labour obliterated Wales, says, can we have a vote of no confidence in the whole of the Labour Party, including the Muppets running Wales? Andy says, do you think there's a possibility MPs like the person for Liverpool you spoke to earlier on might mutiny against Starmer and his cabinet and look at bringing back in Corbyn and those associated with his, as of now unnamed, Your Party? I can see this happening. Andy, I think that'll be a very, very difficult thing to do, but it's not outside the realms of possibility. Certainly, I think Labour is a very split party at the moment. I think there'll probably be further defections once Jeremy Corbyn's party gets properly up and running. It'll be very interesting to see how they do in the upcoming local elections, especially in London. There's a lot of support for Jeremy Corbyn. He is a London MP, of course, but in London as well. There's something like 1,800 council seats in London that are up for grabs in May. I think Labour are going to do very badly there, far worse than they did in the elections that just passed in May. So it'll be fascinating to see, and we'll bring you every development, of course, here on Talk. Kate, talking about Jill in Cornwall a bit earlier on. Jill said everything that my husband and I feel at the moment, says Kate. We're good people, we work hard, and we feel uncomfortable, restless, and more importantly, insecure. For the first time in our lives, we're seriously considering moving abroad. I don't think that the UK will survive another 14 months with this incapable government. And Dave in Kingston, great part of the world, my aunt used to live near there. It's time to put this two-tier system to the test, says Dave. Next time anyone shouts or tweets Nazi or fascist, we should report it to the police, say we feel harassed, threatened and in fear of our lives, and demand they go after these people and arrest them, says Dave. Well, thanks for all your thoughts. Plenty more to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. We're going to take a peek inside the Sun in just a minute. John Lucas is with us, I think, this evening, who is the night news editor. Yeah, that's correct. And we'll find out the stories that they're covering tomorrow. We'll get plenty of thoughts from you as well. Now's the time to pick up the phone and give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Whatever your view is on the stories of the day, you let me know and we'll discuss it before 7. Stay with us.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thanks so much for your company this Friday evening. Loads to talk about today, not least the news and the updates in regard to Charlie Kirk, the assassination that happened. Of course, the suspect has been identified as Tyler Robinson, who's a 22-year-old Utah resident. Well, to tell us more about this and, of course, the coverage that is going to be in The Sun tomorrow, John Lucas is with us, the night news editor at the paper. John, this will be a major story for you tomorrow, I'm sure.
Yeah, huge story. It was our splash today, and we've got our US editor Scarlett House is on the ground over there. We had a big press conference today with various officials, the state governor and Kash Patel, head of the FBI, who've been setting out what they so far have told us about this guy and his background. So initially it was thought that he's some sort of left-wing activist. It hasn't really become much clearer about his motivations today, but what we do know is his dad was a 27-year veteran of the local sheriff's department. Mum, another sort of upstanding member of the local community, so he's come from a very good family. He's a very bright guy. He won a scholarship to go to university, but he dropped out. The family, like a lot of American families, had guns around, and we've seen pictures of him having had a gun for a Christmas present, but also sort of chillingly, he seems to have become quite, I don't know if radicalised is the right word, but he spent a lot of time online. He started to really dislike Charlie Kirk, and you know, he described him as being full of hate. And yeah, as I say, we don't know exactly what the motive is, but some interesting information about what was on some of these bullet casings. Initially, there was this story put around that it was some sort of pro-trans slogans. That's not quite right, but there's things like "Hey Fascists, Catch" written on them, and various other sort of online meme type references. So and we also know that the police have found messages on Discord, which is this messaging app, talking to somebody about where he's left the rifle, which was used to kill Charlie Kirk. So it does all seem very incriminating. But I mean, at least they've got this guy. We're over there and you know, proper boots on the ground journalism and trying to find out a bit more about it.
We spoke to Scarlett a little bit earlier on the programme as well. Closer to home, let's talk about a story I know you've been following for some time now, about local councils prepared to fight the Home Office over their plans to move hotel migrants to disused military bases and homes of multiple occupancy. You had a good story. We talked to Will, your colleague, yesterday about a university accommodation as well, but this is a slightly different aspect of this. Talk us through it.
Yeah, well, look, it's inevitable this time of year. The migrant issue is going to lose a little bit of focus because we'll have fewer crossings in the worst weather, but we will stay on it with stories like this, looking at this is going to be one of the future battlegrounds. So the Labour government wants to scrap the hotel policy. Great, which, you know, a lot of people agree that's very good, but the answer is, from their point of view, is to put people into the communities, so into these houses of multiple occupation. So at the moment, any landlord can just turn their house into a HMO if it's for up to 6 people, and local councils are essentially powerless to do anything about it. What we've found out is that more and more councils are looking at changing their rule book, essentially, so that if somebody wants to do this, it's going to have to come before the planning committee, with the implication that these councils want to stop the landlords doing it. That's going to cause a massive headache for the government, because at the moment there still isn't a wider plan to actually deal with, you know, at the moment I think we've got 32,000 migrants in hotels, and again when we get back into May, June next year, unless there's a proper deterrent in place, then that number will continue to increase exponentially, as we've seen over this summer. The other element to this story is that councils are also going to fight more against the idea of putting the migrants into these former military bases or current military housing, essentially. So we'll be keeping on top of it. that's that's one element of the migrant issue. But yeah.
Fat jobs are a really, really interesting topic. Now, 1 death a week linked to the injections. There is this kind of sense of, are they too good to be true? Do we know all the issues with them? There are lots of people who get them in slightly nefarious ways, online prescriptions and things like that are perhaps not the best or safest way to do so. You've been looking into this as well. Really, really interesting about these 5 patient deaths a month. Very concerning.
Yeah, well, they're massively popular now. So I think there's about 1.5 million Brits are taking these jabs. They've been an absolute lifeline for many, many people. You know, nobody's disputing that. It's a little bit, it reminds me a little bit like vaping. You know, vaping is much healthier than smoking, there's no doubt about it. But what we've seen, there are health concerns about vaping. And obviously, you know, it is much healthier to be slimmer, but equally there might be risks that accompany it. So what we've seen, so these are figures from the Medicines and Healthcare Products Regulatory Agency. It's quite a mouthful, to be honest, itself. So the figures have risen from 82 at the end of January to 106 by June 24th. So this is in the last 21 weeks, there have been 24 people have died. And what could be happening is these drugs, they mimic a hormone in the gut that makes you feel full. That's how it works. It's like the old gastric bypass, where you're actually making your stomach smaller. This gives you the feeling of feeling fuller, but it triggers nausea, causes vomiting, diarrhea, and because of this it can cause pancreatitis, which we've seen coroners note this on medical records, but they haven't necessarily said it is because of this jab. But this is all being noted, and these figures are being collated, and it's being taken more and more seriously. There was we had last year this nurse, Susan McGowan. She had died after taking these injections, a low dose of Mounjaro, just over a fortnight. So there's a very, very sort of small time frame there. And another poor chap, Aid Robinson, had died last November. He had sepsis. Again, that he'd lost 2 stone on the drug, but it was linked to his drug use there. So you know, it's a very worrying thing. Another figure is that these prescriptions, a lot of people with diabetes are being given them, which obviously is a big boost. You know, if you've got that sort of illness and your GP says
you've got to lose weight,
let's take it. You're going to give it a go. But yeah, a big warning today. And
well, we can read all about that in the Sun tomorrow. Tell us about a con man. And this is really fascinating. I mean, I sort of reluctantly admire him in a way for sending bosses a fake High Court letter claiming he'd been approved for release. I mean, you got to admire that ingenuity in some way.
Yeah, well, we loved this morning. We thought it was actually a wind-up when we saw it. This is a chap called Junaid Ahmed. Now, he was convicted of fraud 2 years ago.
Rather appropriately.
He's a convicted fraudster.
Yes.
What he'd been doing, he'd been posing as a doctor in order to rent a property he could not afford, and there was a mortgage fraud as well, so he bought a £2 million property. He was banged up in HMP Chelmsford. He, with some cohorts, he designed a letter, supposedly from the High Court, to the prison governor saying, there's been a terrible mistake here. Mr. Ahmed shouldn't be in prison anymore. I direct his release, essentially.
Brilliant.
And unbelievably, you think no one's ever tried this before. This chap, you've got to give it to him.
Yeah.
He thought, well, I'll give it a go.
10 out of 10 for shamelessness.
I'll give it a go. And they said, oh, well, we better let him out. So they did. He walked out the front door. Where he came unstuck was in prison, he'd made friends with these 2 chaps. And when he got out, he spent 6 months back at home with his wife. They didn't realise.
Yes.
When he got out, he said, look, I'm really good friends with, you know, Jonathan, and I think I'm going to make his day. So he did it again. So he sent these 2 further letters to the prison governor. At that point, the bosses of prison went, This is weird.
Hold on a second. Seem to be making quite a lot of mistakes here.
Yeah, so he was rumbled. So he's been returned to prison, this guy. He's got a couple of co-conspirators. He's not been sentenced yet. He'll be sentenced. And the judge's comments, it'll be very interesting to hear what the judge says about the prison bosses. This will be in a couple of weeks.
Certainly.
We'll
being taken in by a few dodgy letterheads. Well, very, very interesting stuff. That's all in The Sun tomorrow. John, thank you very much. John Lucas there, the night news editor of The Sun. I definitely want to read that last story. Absolutely fascinating. We'll hear more from you, and we'll have a quick chat with Kevin O'Sullivan about what's coming up on his programme. He's here between 7 and 9 in this studio this evening, and then what just happened will be broadcast as well. Stay with us here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, we've been talking quite a lot on the programme, both today and yesterday, about Peter Mandelson, about the pressure that Keir Starmer is under. And earlier, the Labour MP, Kim Johnson, spoke to me about how she feels Keir Starmer's government is doing. Let's just remind you of what she said. It wasn't exactly positive.
Just one thing, we're just lurching from one crisis to another. And as I've just mentioned, Mandelson should never have been appointed. As you've just stated, it was known about his relationship, about him staying in the flats. The recent revelations that we've heard this week are unacceptable. And when you've got party loyalists coming out and defending the indefensible, I think is unacceptable. And it does bring into judgment, our Prime Minister's judgment in terms of some of these issues. And so we have been impacted quite negatively. People are not voting for Starmer. His popularity has, hit the floor. So something's not going right, and that needs to change.
Kim Johnson there, the Labour MP, speaking to me a bit earlier on. Well, you've been getting in touch about all of this, and Dawn in Chelmsford says many people talking about the end of days for Starmer and his dysfunctional government. My fear is the November budget, which could really be the end. Robert in London has given me a ring. I will talk to him in a second. But Mary in Cyprus. Mary, apologies, we've stood you up and stood you down a couple of times. We had quite a fast-moving, dynamic programme. Thanks for your patience. Finally, what would you like to say?
Well, hello, and it's not been a problem. I just wanted to say that it turns out that Mr. Mandelson isn't a very nice man.
Yes, who'd have thought?
And how did he get the job in the first place? And I reckon that he's got something on Mr. Starmer that Mr. Starmer doesn't want to come to light. But now he's had to dismiss him as the ambassador. I think it's going to be very interesting.
Do you think Mandelson could become a real thorn in the side of Keir Starmer? He's not someone you would want as an enemy, is he?
Well, no, he isn't. And I think that he's got things that he knows that perhaps other people don't, and Mr. Starmer doesn't want known either. That's all I'm saying.
What do you think about how the government is being run at the moment, Mary? Because we had, in the words of Labour MP Kim Johnson there, she thinks it's lurching from one crisis to the next.
Well, as you know, I live in Cyprus, but obviously we're expats, so we're still very interested in what goes on there.
Yes.
But I think this government is absolutely disgraceful. They're cheats, they're liars. They don't answer questions, and people are just, I think, getting very fed up with them.
Mary, thanks so much for your thoughts there. That's Mary in Cyprus. I wonder what Robert in London thinks. Robert, do you agree with what Mary has just said there? You're very welcome to the programme.
Thank you. Thanks, Peter. Funny enough, it kind of dovetails potentially into what I'm thinking. I agree with her. We'll see. Hopefully there's more to come out, because we seem to be in an age of revelation. Look, I look at what's going on in the country, and I think, imagine a foreign power that wanted to weaken us economically, and because the world is about getting market share, isn't it? And buildings, trading, and all that. So imagine
the growth that Keir Starmer says he wants, and we got 0% growth this morning.
Well, and look at how much money they're spending. I can get you growth if you're spending the way they are, but
and what they're spending it on as well. 44% of what our economy does is the government. It's 44%.
It's insane, and that's the thing. Starmer is a member of the Fabian Society, and these people believe in bringing about socialist and communist utopias, but they believe in doing it through an evolutionary way rather than a revolutionary way, right? Mm-hmm. And if you take that idea, and then you see that Starmer was head of the CPS, and the file was presented to him twice on Jimmy Savile, and no further action was taken. So he missed one of the most prolific paedophiles in British history, and then he seems to be embroiled with a paedophile. I'm not saying the man is a paedophile, okay? But there's all these really obvious cases of sort of, the thing about paedophiles is people use that information, and they leverage and they blackmail and they control politicians potentially. And I just look at what has been going on. From the very start, it's been a disaster for this government, because they lied, and they deliberately lied. I can understand when someone gets into trouble and there was an unforeseen circumstance, but they had no intention from the very start. And then you look at all the relationship with Lord Ali and the cheap suits, which basically...
Well, very expensive suits, yeah.
Expensive suits, but it showed a cheapness of character. Head of the CPS makes 170 grand a year, and he's accepting free glasses and clothes for him and his wife. What kind of man does that, right? And when you're in public office and you're meant to be seen as independent. And of course, the allegations will always be, what kind of favours was he doing for this guy? Who look, what I'm saying, Peter, is none of my mates are paedophiles. None of them. And this guy just keeps bumping into them. None of my mates are destroying their
Well, he
company.
wasn't bumping into Jimmy Savile. He was someone who was head of the CPS when that happened, and he has no connection to Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, Peter Mandelson is the person who has a connection to Jeffrey Epstein. So I think that's maybe a bit far-fetched, what you're saying.
I know what you're saying. What I'm saying is, I just look at the state of the country, and if someone said to me, actually there is a foreign power like, you know, China or North Korea who's trying to influence our politics and undermine us and our civic institutions, and, you know, from the schools to the policing to the judiciary to the economy, I go, oh yeah, it looked like this, what we've got now.
Okay,
Now, look at
okay.
Keir Starmer, do you know what I mean?
Well, I just wonder, I mean, having worked in government myself, I can tell you 99% is cock up, 1% conspiracy. Robert, thanks for your call, I appreciate that. Philip's in South Wales. Philip, what would you like to say?
Hello, Peter.
Hi there.
Excellent show as usual.
Thank you.
Yeah, what I'd like to say is that Starmer should resign now. If you remember, Mandelson said that it was like an albatross around his neck.
Yeah.
Well, the albatross is around Starmer's neck now. Yeah, and he's just got to go. I think that.
Do you think he will? Do you think he will hear what you're saying, what Kim Johnson, the MP, is saying?
Yeah, absolutely. She was 100% right. And I think if he doesn't go soon, the implications or the ramifications of him staying on a world scene is that all the world leaders are going to take a dim view of him because they're going to call him Pinocchio Starmer.
Yeah, well, indeed. Philip, listen, great call. Very interesting to talk to you, and thanks for your kind words. Let's hear a quick word from David in London. Final call of Drive today. David, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, cool. That's a good news. Right. What's happened to Mr. Khan then?
Yeah, he's been a bit quiet, hasn't he? Sir Sadiq to you, Knight of the Realm.
Where's the blimp flying in London? What's happening?
There's no blimp this time for the state visit, is there, David? He's been very quiet, hasn't he?
Well, is it to do with his ambition, or has he been told to be quiet?
Yeah, well, I think that's a very, very reasonable point to raise, because there is absolutely no love lost between Sadiq Khan and Donald Trump, is there?
No. Well, I think at the end of the day, maybe he's got ambitions that are even higher than London Mayor.
Well, I think he certainly does have very, very high ambitions, David. I'm not sure I necessarily would want to help him with those ambitions. I really appreciate your call. That's David in London there. Kevin O'Sullivan on the other side of the news. Hi, yeah.
Well, we're going to kick off by focusing on the fury of the left, the disgusting behaviour of the left. Do you know that Blue Sky social media site, which is the kind of Be Kind groupthink's echo chamber for all the everybody who left Twitter, because it's so hateful of hate. I mean, you should have a look at it. It is full of people dancing on Charlie Kirk's grave. It has even published today a long list of the other right-of-centre commentators that they would like to be murdered. I mean, and on it goes. He was described as he was likened to KKK leader David Duke, and so on and so forth. So these people are not learning that, you know, if you use these kind of terms, if you speak in this manner, it leads to assassinations. It leads to what happens to Charlie Kirk. Instead of this being a wake-up call, it seems to have made things worse. So we'll focus on that. And again, we had some fun last night with Peter Mandelson. I'm going to carry on my theme. I'm sick to death of it. He's a brilliant genius, political strategist, one of the most capable ministers ever done. The man is an arrant idiot. He is a fool. He's the fool on Capitol Hill. Absolute moron. Now, that doesn't mean he's a... You know, I'm not challenging his intellect.
Yes.
But his judgment is just catastrophic.
Well, it takes quite a lot to get sacked 3 times.
3 times. Hat trick. Yeah, we'll look at Starmer's judgment, which now I think is becoming literally a national crisis. I really do.
Yeah, well, we had Kim Johnson